The canoe strikes something beneath the surface. Not rocks, not a sandbar. Something that moves. 23 members of the coastal Marawai tribe freeze mid-paddle as their 3 dugout canoes glide into the shallows of what should have been their salvation. For 6 days, they've fled the volcanic eruptions that destroyed their homeland on the main island. 6 days of rationing dried fish and rainwater. 6 days of children crying, elders weakening, hope fading with each passing wave. This small island, barely 3 kilometers across, dense with prehistoric ferns and cycads, appeared on the horizon like a gift from the ancestors. But the water here is wrong. Tribal elder Kano, his weathered face mapping 7 decades of oceanic wisdom, raises his hand for silence. The morning mist clings to the beach like a warning. Something massive disturbs the water 30 meters offshore, creating a wake that shouldn't exist in water this shallow. The disturbance moves parallel to the beach, deliberate, hunting. Then it surfaces. The head emerges first, a crocodilian snout nearly 2 meters long, lined with conical teeth designed for gripping, not chewing. But this is no crocodile. As the creature rises further, a sail-like structure unfolds from its back, towering 3 meters high, catching the early sunlight in a display of raw, prehistoric power. Water cascades off scales that shimmer between olive green and sandy brown. Perfect camouflage for the river deltas this creature once ruled 65 million years ago. A Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, 15 meters of apex predatory perfection, and it's staring directly at them. The children's screams shatter the momentary paralysis. Kano's grandson, 8-year-old Manu, drops his paddle as the adults desperately drive the canoes toward shore. The Spinosaurus doesn't charge, not yet. It tracks them with unsettling intelligence, those yellow reptilian eyes calculating, measuring, learning. This is a predator that has hunted before, that understands pursuit and ambush, that knows the difference between prey and threat. The first canoe beaches hard, tipping sideways as 10 people scramble onto the volcanic sand. The second follows seconds later. But the third canoe, carrying Kano, Manu, and 6 others, including pregnant Lyra, catches on submerged volcanic rock 20 meters from shore. The Spinosaurus moves. Not with the lumbering gait of land-based predators, but with the streamlined efficiency of a creature perfectly adapted for aquatic hunting. Its powerful tail propels it forward in a burst of speed that seems impossible for something so massive. The sail on its back cuts through the water like a shark's fin as it closes the distance in heartbeats. "Abandon the canoe!" Kano shouts. But Lyra is 7 months pregnant, moving slowly, panic written across her young face. Kano and 2 other men, brothers Taku and Soru, form a barrier between her and the approaching nightmare, clutching the only weapons they have: fishing spears with obsidian points, designed for catching yellowfin tuna, not battling prehistoric monsters. The Spinosaurus reaches them in the shallows. Standing upright on powerful hind legs, it towers over the canoe, that massive sail blocking out the sun. Its front limbs, shorter than its hind legs but tipped with curved claws, reach down almost experimentally. This close, they can see every detail. The nostrils positioned high on the snout for breathing while partially submerged. The crocodilian armor plating along its spine. The scars crossing its hide from battles fought with prey and rivals across deep time. Taku thrusts his spear upward in desperate defense. The obsidian point strikes the creature's chest, penetrating perhaps 2 centimeters before snapping against the dense hide. The Spinosaurus doesn't roar or flinch. It simply adjusts its massive jaws and clamps down on Taku's torso. What happens next will haunt every survivor for the rest of their lives, however long that might be. The creature doesn't chew. Those conical teeth weren't designed for that. Instead, it shakes its head violently, the way crocodiles drown prey, using raw force and torsion to break Taku's body. Blood clouds the shallow water as the Spinosaurus backs away, dragging the now limp form deeper, making direct eye contact with the frozen survivors, as if delivering a message. This island is mine. The remaining 7 people in the canoe abandon everything and run. Kano pulls Manu through waist-deep water, while Soru supports Lyra, her screams mixing with the horrified cries echoing from the beach where the rest of the tribe watches helplessly. The Spinosaurus could pursue. They're completely vulnerable. But it doesn't. It has its meal. For now. The tribe huddles together on the beach as the full weight of their situation crashes down. Taku's wife, Ani, collapses in the sand, keening a traditional mourning song that seems obscene in its beauty against the horror they've just witnessed. The elders quickly attempt to take stock. 22 survivors now, down from 23. 3 damaged canoes, 1 completely waterlogged and useless. Supplies lost when they fled. Most of their dried fish stores, water gourds, tools, fire-starting materials. What they have? 3 small bundles of supplies from the canoes that made it intact. The clothes on their backs, a handful of knives and spears, and 1 small cooking pot. And they're trapped on an island with a fully grown Spinosaurus that has just learned humans are easy prey. The young hunter Koa, barely 20, but already showing the leadership qualities the tribe respects, volunteers to scout the immediate area, while the others secure a camp location. He moves quickly along the tree line, noting details that will become crucial in the days ahead. The beach curves around roughly 2/3 of the island's perimeter. The interior rises sharply to a central hill, perhaps 150 meters high, covered in dense prehistoric vegetation that looks simultaneously familiar and alien. Tree ferns tower overhead, cycads cluster in the undergrowth, and strange flowering plants emit powerful scents. More importantly, he finds tracks. Not recent tracks. The rain has washed them partially away, but unmistakable nonetheless. The 3-toed impressions in the dried mud near a freshwater stream are each nearly a meter long. The Spinosaurus has been here before. This isn't a random visit. This is its territory. Koa also finds something else. Bones. Not dinosaur bones, but human remains scattered near a crude shelter that's been torn apart. Judging by the weathering and the remnants of different clothing styles, these weren't from one group, but several, stretched across months or possibly years. Other people have washed up on this island. None of them left. He doesn't report this finding when he returns to the rapidly assembling camp. The tribe is already on the edge of panic. Lyra is having contractions, stress-induced, the midwives hope, not actual labor. 2 of the children are showing signs of dehydration. Elder Kano's hands shake as he attempts to start a fire using the traditional friction method, the dampness of the island making it maddeningly difficult. But young Manu, despite witnessing his uncle's death just hours ago, makes a discovery that gives them their first small victory. He finds a grove of coconut palms near the freshwater stream, their trunks scarred with old claw marks. The Spinosaurus has been here too, but laden with ripe fruit. It's not much, but it's immediate nutrition and hydration. As the sun sets on their first day, the tribe finally coaxes a flame to life. They huddle close to its warmth and light, knowing fire is their only real defense against what lurks in the island's waters. Kano assigns watch rotations. No one sleeps unguarded. The fire must never go out. From somewhere in the darkness beyond their small circle of flickering light, they hear it. A deep, resonant call that's part crocodilian bellow, part something else entirely. The Spinosaurus announcing its presence, reminding them who rules this island. The sound carries across the water, echoing off the distant volcanic peaks of the main island they fled, now visible only as a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. Behind them, that island still glows with the orange hellfire of active lava flows. Ahead, on this supposedly safe refuge, a different kind of hell awaits. Soru stares into the fire, his brother's blood still staining his fishing spear, and asks the question everyone is thinking. How do we survive a month on an island with that thing? Elder Kano has no answer. In all his years navigating these waters, studying the habits of sharks and crocodiles, reading the ocean's moods and mysteries, nothing has prepared him for this. The old stories speak of monsters and sea demons, but those were always metaphors, weren't they? Lessons about respecting the ocean's power, not literal warnings about prehistoric predators that shouldn't exist. But they do exist. One killed Taku in seconds. And now, as the fire crackles and the night deepens, the tribe must accept an impossible reality. They're not just stranded, they're prey. The first night passes in terrible wakefulness. Every sound from the jungle, every snapping branch, every rustling frond, every mysterious call from unknown creatures could be the Spinosaurus circling back for easier prey. The creature is semi-aquatic. That much is obvious from its body structure and hunting behavior. But can it move well on land? Will it venture into the jungle? Does it hunt at night? These are questions that will be answered in blood and terror over the coming days. As dawn finally breaks on their second day, painting the sky in shades of red that seem inappropriately beautiful, the tribe faces its first major decision. Stay near the beach where they can monitor the Spinosaurus's movements and have quick access to the canoes for a potential escape, or move deeper into the island's interior, where the creature's size might work against it. The debate is fierce. The younger hunters, led by Koa, argue for moving inland, building fortified shelters in the trees where the massive predator cannot reach. The elders, Kano chief among them, argue for beach proximity, better visibility, easier fishing for food, and keeping the escape route open even if the canoes are currently unusable. But the decision is made for them when young Sila, a girl of 12 who'd been gathering driftwood for the fire, comes running back to camp, terror making her incoherent. When she finally manages to speak, her words chill everyone. "There's another one. A second Spinosaurus. Smaller. On the other side of the island." The hunters confirm it within an hour. The second creature is indeed smaller, perhaps 12 meters long, likely a subadult or female. It's been fishing in a sheltered cove on the island's northern side, and judging by the fresh carcasses of large fish scattered on the rocks, it's been here for some time. 2 Spinosaurus, plural. The tribe's desperate situation has just become exponentially worse. Are these creatures a mated pair? A parent and offspring? Territorial rivals forced to share this small island? Do they hunt together or compete for food? As the sun climbs higher on their second day, Kano makes the call. They move inland immediately. They'll establish a fortified camp on the central hill where they can monitor both sides of. They'll build platforms in the strongest trees, use fire as both weapon and barrier, and pray to every ancestor that these creatures' size and semi-aquatic nature will prevent them from climbing or venturing too far from water. But as they gather their meager supplies and prepare to abandon the beach, Koa notices something that makes his blood run cold. Fresh tracks in the sand, leading from the water to the tree line and back again. Big tracks. The larger Spinosaurus came ashore during the night, passed within 50 meters of their camp, and returned to the water. It was testing them, learning their patterns, deciding if they're worth the effort of hunting. The answer to that question will come sooner than any of them expect, and in a way that demonstrates just how intelligent these prehistoric predators truly are. Week 1. The learning curve of predator and prey. The jungle swallows them whole. Within 20 meters of leaving the beach, the tribe enters a world that existed when their species was nothing more than an evolutionary possibility. Tree ferns tower 15 meters overhead, their fronds creating a canopy so dense that sunlight filters through in scattered beams, illuminating clouds of insects that swarm in the humid air. The ground is treacherous, volcanic rock hidden beneath layers of rotting vegetation, roots that snake across the path like tripwires, and mud that sucks at their feet with every step. Koa leads the way, machete in hand, though machete is generous. It's actually a sharpened piece of volcanic glass bound to a wooden handle, a tool designed for cutting fishing nets, not hacking through prehistoric undergrowth. Behind him, 21 people move in a ragged line, carrying everything they own in bundles on their backs. Lyra, still experiencing intermittent contractions, moves slowly in the middle of the group, supported by the midwife Pua and another woman named Hina. Elder Kano brings up the rear, constantly glancing over his shoulder toward the beach they're abandoning. Through gaps in the vegetation, he can still see the ocean, and more importantly, the distinctive sail of the larger Spinosaurus cutting through the shallows like a periscope, tracking their movement inland. "It's watching us," whispers Manu, clutching his grandfather's hand. The boy hasn't spoken much since witnessing his uncle's death, but his eyes, dark and wide with processing trauma, miss nothing. "I know," Kano replies quietly. "But up there," he points toward the central hill rising ahead of them, "we have advantage. Size becomes weakness on steep terrain." It's a theory, an educated guess based on decades of observing predators, but as they'll soon discover, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus has survived 65 million years of evolution by being far more adaptable than anyone could imagine. The climb takes 3 brutal hours. What looked like 150 meters from the beach turns out to be closer to 200, with the slope increasing sharply in the final third. The children struggle. The elderly wheeze with exertion. Twice they have to stop and redistribute the supplies when carriers collapse from exhaustion and dehydration. But they reach it. A natural plateau roughly 40 meters across, dominated by a massive cycad tree with a trunk so thick it would take 6 people holding hands to encircle it. More importantly, the plateau offers clear sightlines down multiple approaches: north, south, east, and west. Anyone or anything trying to reach them would be visible long before arrival. Koa immediately begins organizing work details. The tribe might be traumatized and exhausted, but they're also coastal people, survivors by culture and necessity. They know how to build, how to organize, how to transform raw resources into shelter and safety. Within hours, the plateau transforms. Using fallen branches and massive fern fronds, they construct 3 primary shelters, one for families with children, one for the elders and pregnant Lyra, and one for the hunters and young adults who'll rotate guard duty. The structures aren't pretty, but they're functional, offering protection from rain and providing psychological security. More importantly, Koa oversees construction of something unprecedented in their tribal history: defensive fortifications. Using the sharpened stakes from their damaged canoes, rocks carried up from below, and vines woven into rope, they create a perimeter barrier around the camp. It wouldn't stop a determined human attacker, let alone a 5-ton predator, but it creates a psychological boundary, a line that says, "This space is ours." As evening approaches on day 2, they achieve their greatest victory: sustainable fire. Young Sela, the girl who discovered the second Spinosaurus, proves to have an unexpected talent. She finds a cluster of resinous plants that burn hot and slow, perfect for maintaining fire through the night with minimal fuel. They establish 3 fire pits around the camp perimeter, creating a triangle of light that pushes back the darkness. But as night falls, and they share a meager meal of coconut meat and raw fish caught from the stream, they don't dare return to the beach for better fishing. A sound echoes up from below that makes everyone freeze mid-bite. Not the deep, bellowing call from the previous night. Something different. Something that sounds disturbingly like communication. The larger Spinosaurus, positioned somewhere on the southern beach, makes a series of low-frequency vocalizations, deep rumbles that carry through the jungle like distant thunder. After a pause of perhaps 10 seconds, the smaller one from the northern cove responds with similar but higher-pitched calls. They're coordinating. "Matriarch and juvenile," Pua the midwife says quietly, her knowledge of animal behavior coming from years of observing sea turtles and dolphins during their breeding seasons. "The smaller one is learning from the larger. That's not mating behavior. That's teaching." The implications chill everyone into silence. They're not dealing with simple animals operating on instinct. They're facing intelligent hunters, capable of learning, adapting, and possibly strategizing. Sleep comes in fitful waves that night, despite the exhaustion. The watch rotation changes every 2 hours, Koa's innovation to keep guards fresh and alert. During his own watch shift, starting at what he estimates is midnight, based on star positions, Koa experiences something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Movement in the darkness beyond the firelight. Not the crashing, obvious movement of a massive predator. Something careful, deliberate. Koa strains his eyes, gripping his spear so tightly his knuckles ache. For 5 full minutes, he sees nothing but shadows and swaying vegetation. Then, for just a moment, moonlight catches something reflective. Eyes. Yellow-green and vertical slitted, roughly 3 meters off the ground, staring directly at him from the edge of the clearing. The larger Spinosaurus has climbed the hill. It doesn't attack, doesn't charge into the camp. It simply stands there in the darkness, watching, learning. After perhaps 2 minutes, though it feels like hours, the eyes blink and disappear. Koa hears nothing. No retreating footsteps, no snapping branches. The creature moves through the jungle with impossible silence for something so massive. When his watch shift ends, Koa doesn't report what he saw. What would be the point? They're already terrified. Confirming that the Spinosaurus can navigate steep terrain and move silently through dense jungle would only push them toward panic. But he knows. And knowing changes everything about their survival strategy. Day 3 brings their first real crisis since Taku's death. Water. The freshwater stream they've been relying on, a narrow flow trickling down the hillside, slows to barely a trickle by mid-morning. Kano traces it upward and discovers the problem. The stream originates from a spring at the very summit of the hill. But something has disturbed the source. Mud and debris have partially blocked the flow. Natural occurrence? Or something else? Koa volunteers to lead a water expedition back down to the larger stream they passed during their initial climb, the one with the Spinosaurus tracks nearby. It's a calculated risk. They need water to survive more than 3 days, let alone a month. And staying hydrated is crucial for Lyra, whose contractions have thankfully stopped, but whose pregnancy demands significant fluid intake. He takes 5 others, his cousin Dane, 2 experienced hunters named Roko and Malo, and surprisingly, young Manu. The boy volunteers, and despite Kano's protests, Koa accepts. Manu moves quietly, observes carefully, and has the sharp eyes of youth. More importantly, keeping him active and useful might help process the trauma of watching his uncle die. They descend in a tight formation, weapons ready, moving from cover to cover like they're hunting dangerous game. Which, in a sense, they are. Only in this scenario, they're also the game. The stream is exactly where they remember. A clear, fast-flowing channel cutting through volcanic rock, pooling in several places deep enough to submerge a person. The tracks are there too, but they're not alone anymore. Fresh impressions in the soft mud show that both Spinosaurus have visited this water source within the last day. Multiple times. They're using the same water we need, Roko observes, stating the obvious but important fact. We're competing with them for the island's resources. It's an ecological reality that will define their entire month on this island. The Spinosaurus aren't just threats to be avoided. They're apex predators at the top of a food chain, and the tribe has been forcibly inserted into that chain in a position they've never occupied in their evolutionary history. Prey species competing for the same resources as their predators. They work quickly, filling every container they brought: coconut shells, hollowed bamboo sections, even makeshift bladders made from fish skin. The water is cold, clear, and tastes faintly of volcanic minerals. Wonderful. Then Manu notices something that changes everything. "Fish," he whispers, pointing to one of the deeper pools. He's right. The stream is teeming with them. Strange, primitive-looking fish with armored scales and barbels around their mouths. They're bottom feeders, probably related to ancient lungfish species, and they're abundant. Protein. Abundant, accessible protein that doesn't require risking the beach or ocean fishing. Malo, the most experienced fisherman among them, quickly assesses the situation. We could set traps. Woven reed baskets placed in the current, checked daily. Low risk, high reward. It's the first genuinely good news since they landed on this cursed island. But as they're celebrating this small discovery, Dane, who's been watching their perimeter, hisses a warning. Movement. Downhill. Big. They freeze. Through the gaps in the fern understory, perhaps 80 meters away and descending rapidly, the distinctive sail of the larger Spinosaurus emerges. It's moving directly toward the stream, toward them. The hunting party has perhaps 30 seconds to make a decision. The vegetation here is thick, but not thick enough to hide them if the creature enters the water and looks upstream. Their scent will be carried on the breeze. Their tracks in the mud are obvious. Koa makes the call. Up. Climb. Now. They scramble up the nearest tree fern, using the rough bark for purchase, pulling themselves into the fronds 8 to 10 meters off the ground. It's not high enough, not really, but it's their only option. They spread out across 3 adjacent trees to distribute weight, weapons clutched uselessly in shaking hands. The Spinosaurus reaches the stream. From their elevated position, they have a clear view of the creature in full daylight for the first time. It's even more magnificent and terrifying than the initial attack suggested. The sail on its back isn't just bone and skin. It's covered in a pattern of spots and stripes that likely helped with thermoregulation and display. The creature's arms, which seemed almost vestigial from a distance, are actually powerfully muscled and tipped with curved claws, perfect for gripping struggling fish. It enters the water and begins to hunt. The display is mesmerizing. The Spinosaurus submerges its entire head, using those high-positioned nostrils to breathe, while its jaws sweep through the water like a living net. When it rises, it has 3 of the armored fish clutched in its teeth. It doesn't chew them, just tilts its head back and swallows them whole, the way herons consume their catches. This continues for nearly 20 minutes. The creature is focused, methodical, completely absorbed in fishing. It's so close that they can see old scars across its hide, long, parallel marks that suggest encounters with other large predators, possibly other Spinosaurus. One ear opening has a torn flap of skin, healed but permanent. This animal has lived a long, violent life and survived countless battles. Manu, perched on a branch near Koa, watches with the fascination that only children possess. Despite the terror, despite the trauma, he's observing and learning. Koa sees the boy mentally cataloging details, how the creature moves, how it breathes, how it hunts. Information that might save their lives later. Finally, seemingly satisfied with its meal, the Spinosaurus moves downstream toward the beach. But before it disappears from view, it does something unexpected. It stops, raises its massive head, and appears to scent the air. Then it turns and looks directly at the tree ferns where the hunting party hides. For 5 eternal heartbeats, predator and prey lock eyes. The Spinosaurus's yellow gaze is unnervingly intelligent, calculating. It knows they're there, has probably known since it arrived. So why hasn't it attacked? The answer becomes clear as the creature turns away and continues toward the beach. They're not worth the effort yet. The fish provide easier, more reliable nutrition. The humans are a known quantity now, cataloged in the creature's mental map of the island. When it decides they're worth hunting, it will do so with the same methodical efficiency it showed fishing. Somehow, that's more terrifying than aggressive pursuit. They wait 30 minutes after the Spinosaurus disappears before descending. The water containers are retrieved, along with several of the armored fish that Malo quickly guts and wraps in large leaves. But as they're preparing to climb back up the hill, Rocco makes a discovery that shifts their understanding of the island again. He finds a cave. It's partially hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines and ferns, a volcanic opening roughly 3 meters high and 2 meters wide, cutting into the hillside. The entrance is worn smooth, suggesting water flow during the rainy season, but it's currently dry. Against Koa's better judgment, they're already pushing their luck. They spend 5 minutes exploring. The cave extends roughly 15 meters into the hill before narrowing too much to proceed safely. But in that space, they find evidence of previous human occupation. Fire-blackened stones arranged in a pit, fragments of pottery in an unfamiliar style, and scratched into the rock wall near the entrance, a message in Latin letters that none of them can read but Koa memorizes. 27 died here. God forgive us. 27 people. An entire expedition, possibly European traders or explorers, blown off course years or decades ago. All dead. They don't share this information with the tribe when they return. The water and fish are victory enough. But that night, as Koa transcribes the Latin message in the dirt for Elder Kano, one of the few tribe members who learned limited English and Latin from missionary schools, the old man's translation sucks the hope from both of them. 27 people with presumably better weapons, better knowledge of the modern world, possibly even firearms. All dead. How long did they survive? Weeks? Months? The weathering on the message suggests it's been there for years, possibly decades. We can't tell the others, Kano says firmly. Not yet. They're already operating on the edge of despair. Confirmation that others failed. He trails off, but Koa understands. Day 4 begins with a scream. One of the children, a boy named Kito, barely 6 years old, wandered from the camp at dawn to relieve himself. He didn't go far, maybe 15 meters beyond the defensive perimeter. But somehow, in the 5 minutes he was gone, the smaller Spinosaurus made it to the camp's northern perimeter. The boy is unharmed. The creature is simply standing there, 30 meters away, watching. Not aggressive, not attacking, just observing, the way a scientist might study interesting specimens. The tribe mobilizes instantly. Hunters form a defensive line between the creature and the camp. Koa grabs a burning branch from the fire pit, waving it and shouting to drive the predator away. The Spinosaurus watches these displays with apparent curiosity, tilting its head the way intelligent birds do when processing new information. Then it turns and walks away. Not fleeing, just leaving, as if it's learned what it came to learn and has no further interest. It's studying us, Pua says, voicing what several people are thinking. They both are. Learning our patterns, our defenses, our weaknesses. The realization is profound and terrifying. They're not just surviving on an island with prehistoric predators. They're engaged in a psychological chess match with creatures that have the intelligence to adapt and plan. That afternoon, Koa calls a council with the most capable members of the tribe: Kano, Pua, Malo, Roko, and surprisingly, Lyra, whose pregnancy hasn't dimmed her sharp, tactical mind. They need to shift from reactive survival to proactive strategy. The discussion is frank and brutal. Food situation. The fish traps will help, but they need more protein and variety. The coconuts are abundant, but won't sustain them long term. They need to find other food sources, fruits, edible plants, possibly birds or small mammals. But every foraging expedition risks encounters with the Spinosaurus pair. Water situation. The stream provides adequate water, but the location forces them into the creature's hunting territory daily. They need to either find an alternative source or establish a safer route to and from the current stream. Shelter situation. The plateau camp is defensible, but psychologically draining. They're living in constant alertness, sleeping in shifts, burning through their mental resilience. They need the cave. It's not perfect, the entrance is vulnerable, but it offers solid walls and psychological security that palm frond shelters cannot. Escape situation. The 2 intact canoes are still on the beach, damaged but potentially repairable. But reaching them means crossing territory the Spinosaurus clearly control. And even if they repair the canoes, where would they go? The main island is still erupting. The nearest other landmass is weeks away by canoe. They realistically have 2 choices. Survive on this island for at least a month until the main island's eruptions subside, or attempt a desperate voyage to unknown lands with insufficient supplies. The decision is made. They'll move to the cave in 2 days, after establishing secure supply lines and completing additional scouting. In the meantime, they'll set up the fish traps, map the island more thoroughly, and most importantly, continue studying the Spinosaurus pair's behavior patterns. Because if the creatures are learning about them, they need to learn about the creatures just as intensely. Days 5 and 6 become a blur of activity and observation. Hunting parties rotate in and out, never staying in one location too long, always moving in groups of at least 4. They discover several crucial details. The larger Spinosaurus, they begin calling it the matriarch, has established a pattern. It hunts primarily in the southern waters in the early morning and late afternoon, spending midday resting on a particular stretch of beach where sun-warmed rocks provide heat absorption through its massive sail. The sail, they realize, isn't just for display or intimidation. It's a thermoregulation system, allowing the creature to absorb heat quickly and maintain activity levels despite being semi-aquatic. The smaller Spinosaurus, the juvenile, though it's still large enough to kill any of them effortlessly, is less predictable. It ranges widely around the island, fishing in different locations, exploring the jungle edges, testing boundaries. It's younger, learning, taking risks that the more experienced matriarch avoids. Most concerning, both creatures have become interested in the tribe's activities. They approach closer each day, observing camp routines, studying the humans' movement patterns. It's the behavior of intelligent predators assessing a new food source, deciding if the risk versus reward calculation is favorable. On day 6 evening, they get their answer to that calculation. The fish trap team, Malo, Dane, and 2 younger women named Seifa and Uki, are at the stream doing their evening collection when the juvenile appears upstream. Not downstream where it could approach from the beach, upstream from the jungle, cutting off their retreat to camp. It's a deliberate ambush. The 4 people do exactly what they've been trained to do. They stand together, make themselves appear larger, brandish weapons, and create noise. Standard anti-predator behavior that works on most aggressive animals. The juvenile is not impressed. It moves into the stream, water barely reaching its knees, and begins a slow, inexorable advance. Not charging, not aggressive, just walking forward with the patience of a creature that knows its prey has nowhere to go. Malo makes a decision that saves their lives but costs them dearly. He signals the others to cross the stream and climb the steep bank on the opposite side, away from camp, away from safety, but away from the juvenile. As they scramble up the muddy slope, slipping and clawing for purchase, Malo stays behind. He grabs 2 of the burning torches they've started carrying for exactly this purpose, and lights them from the small fire pot they maintain at the fishing site. Then he advances toward the juvenile, waving the flames, shouting challenges in the old tongue that his grandfather taught him for warding off evil spirits. The juvenile stops. For a crucial few seconds, It focuses entirely on Malo and the unfamiliar threat of fire. In that window, Cepha, Dane, and Uki reach the top of the bank and begin running parallel to the stream, heading for the long route back to camp. But Malo knows he can't retreat. If he turns his back, if he shows weakness, the juvenile will pursue and likely catch him. So he does the unthinkable. He advances further, pushing the creature back, buying time for the others to escape. The juvenile hisses, a sound like steam escaping pressure, primal and wrong. Then, demonstrating the problem-solving intelligence that makes these creatures so dangerous, it simply steps sideways out of the stream and begins circling through the jungle around Malo's position. Malo understands immediately. He's being flanked. He runs. The chase lasts less than 30 seconds, but feels eternal. Crashing through undergrowth, leaping over roots, burning torches clutched in both hands, Malo hears the juvenile pursuing. Massive footfalls, breaking branches, terrifyingly fast for something so large. He doesn't look back. Looking back means slowing down, and slowing down means death. He reaches a cluster of closely spaced tree ferns and dives into the center, using the trunks as barriers, the burning torches thrust outward like spears. The juvenile arrives seconds later, snout probing between the trees, claws scraping bark, but unable to reach its prey without getting burned. The standoff lasts nearly 10 minutes. Malo keeps the torches burning and positioned, knowing they're his only defense. The juvenile circles, probes, tries different angles, learns what doesn't work. Eventually, with what sounds disturbingly like frustration, it withdraws. But it doesn't go far. Through gaps in the fern cluster, Malo watches it settle roughly 20 meters away, lying down in a sphinx-like posture, head up and alert. Waiting. It's siege behavior, intelligent, patient, strategic. Back at camp, when Cepha, Dane, and Uki arrive without Malo and explain what happened, Koa immediately assembles a rescue party. 8 people, every available weapon, multiple torches. They move fast down the hill, following the stream, making as much noise as possible to appear as a large, threatening group. They find Malo still trapped, the juvenile still waiting. When the rescue party appears, larger numbers, more fire, more noise, the juvenile finally withdraws, melting into the jungle with remarkable stealth. Malo is extracted, traumatized but unharmed. But the psychological damage to the entire tribe is severe. The creatures aren't just physically dangerous. They're strategic hunters, capable of planning ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and siege tactics. That night, the tribe council makes a decision. The cave move happens tomorrow. No more delays. The plateau camp, for all its visibility advantages, is too exposed, too accessible to creatures that have proven they can climb terrain and employ tactical thinking. As day 7 of their island imprisonment dawns, marking 1 full week in hell, they begin the careful, dangerous process of relocating everything to the cave. Multiple trips, heavily guarded, moving in large groups. During the second supply run, young Manu finds something that becomes the tribe's first real weapon in this survival war. A fallen cycad tree with a trunk roughly 20 centimeters in diameter and 4 meters long. It's heavy, requiring 4 people to carry, but it's straight, strong, and one end has naturally broken into a sharpened point. Koa immediately sees the potential. With their remaining obsidian tools, they sharpen the point further, fire-harden it in the flames, and create the island's first genuine spear. Not a fishing tool adapted for defense, but a weapon actually designed to harm something large. It's not enough to kill a Spinosaurus, but it might be enough to discourage one. By evening, the cave has been transformed into a fortified camp. They block the entrance with a barrier of sharpened stakes and heavy rocks, leaving only a narrow, defended opening. Fire pits are established inside and outside the cave mouth. The fish traps are relocated to a closer section of stream. Sleeping areas are designated in the cave's interior, where the walls provide psychological comfort and the darkness offers concealment. It's not comfortable. The cave is damp, cold at night, and claustrophobic. But it's As week 1 ends and week 2 begins, Elder Kano sits at the cave entrance, watching the distant beaches, where occasionally they can spot the distinctive sails of their 2 tormentors cutting through the shallows. Manu joins him, the boy's young face hardened by experiences no child should endure. "Grandfather?" Manu asks quietly. "How do we kill them?" Kano doesn't answer immediately. The question reveals how much the tribe's psychology has shifted. They've moved from flight to fight, from victims to warriors. It's necessary for survival, but disturbing in its rapidity. "We don't kill them," Kano finally replies. "We're not equipped for that fight. Our weapons are toys compared to their natural arsenal. But we can learn to live alongside them." Ancient peoples shared land with dangerous predators: tigers, bears, crocodiles. They learned patterns, established boundaries, developed strategies. We must do the same. "But Uncle Taku died because we didn't understand what we faced. Now we do. Now we adapt." It's a survival philosophy that will be tested severely in the days to come, as the tribe discovers that adaptation is a two-way street, and Spinosaurus aegyptiacus has been adapting for 65 million years. Week 2. The Academy of Blood. The cave smells of smoke, fish, and fear. Day 8 begins with Lyra's water breaking. The midwife Pua knew it was coming. The stress of their situation has been pushing Lyra's body toward premature labor for days. But knowing doesn't make it easier. They're in a damp cave on an island controlled by prehistoric predators, with no proper medical supplies, no clean water hot enough for sterilization, and no margin for complications. "We need hot water, clean cloths, and privacy," Pua announces, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's delivered 43 babies over 3 decades. "And we need the men out. Now." The cave becomes controlled chaos. The women create a private area in the deepest section, using hung palm fronds as curtains. The men are banished to the cave entrance, where they huddle anxiously, trying not to think about the screams that will inevitably come. Koa organizes a water heating operation, using their precious pottery and fire-heated stones. But the timing is catastrophic. This is the day they'd planned to establish proper hunting protocols, systematic observation of the Spinosaurus pair to map their territorial boundaries and behavioral patterns. Instead, half the tribe is focused on childbirth, while the other half stands guard, weapons ready, knowing that Lyra's screams might attract exactly the kind of attention they can't afford. Elder Kano makes a decision that demonstrates why he's survived 7 decades. He turns crisis into opportunity. Koa, Malo, Roko, Dane, Soru, Manu, with me. We'll conduct the observation mission as planned. The women can defend the cave if needed, but statistically, midday is when both creatures are least active. We move now, we learn, we return before the dangerous hours. It's cold calculation, but it's also correct. Sitting uselessly at the cave entrance won't help Lyra, and they desperately need information. The tribe has spent 7 days reacting to the Spinosaurus. It's time to study them with purpose. The 6-man observation team moves carefully down the hillside, splitting into 2 groups. Kano, Koa, and young Manu will observe the matriarch on the southern beach. Malo, Roko, and Soru will track the juvenile's movements on the northern side. Kano's group reaches their observation point, a rocky outcrop 50 meters from the beach, concealed by dense fern growth, by mid-morning. The matriarch is exactly where previous observations suggested she'd be. On her favorite sun-warmed rock formation, her massive body stretched out in a pose that's oddly reptilian and oddly bird-like simultaneously. For the next 3 hours, they watch. Kano has brought something precious, a piece of charcoal and several large, flat leaves to record observations in the old pictographic style his own grandfather taught him. Manu, with his sharp young eyes, calls out details while Kano sketches and Koa memorizes every pattern. What they learn is simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. The matriarch follows a strict routine. She spends roughly 4 hours in the morning fishing and hunting in the shallows. They observe her catching not just fish, but also a large crab and what appears to be a juvenile sea turtle. Her hunting method is fascinating. She submerges completely, using her powerful tail for propulsion, moving more like a crocodile than any land-based dinosaur. The sail on her back folds slightly, reducing drag. She can stay underwater for nearly 4 minutes. Manu counts the time using his pulse as a rough clock. After hunting, she returns to the sunrock for thermoregulation. This is clearly crucial behavior. They watch as she positions herself with the sail perpendicular to the sun, maximizing heat absorption. After approximately 90 minutes, she shifts position, now angling the sail to shed excess heat. She's using it like a living radiator, maintaining optimal body temperature for activity. Semi-aquatic predators need external heat regulation, Kano murmurs, sketching rapidly. She's powerful, but dependent on the sun. Cold, cloudy days might make her sluggish. It's information that could save lives. But they also observe something concerning: intelligence markers. The matriarch doesn't just hunt randomly. She tests different sections of the shallows systematically, learning which areas have the most fish at different times. When a large fish escapes her initial strike, she doesn't give up. She pursues it with problem-solving persistence, adjusting her angle of attack, using rocks to corner it. It's tool use, primitive, but more disturbing. Twice during their observation period, the matriarch stops her activities and looks directly toward the hillside. Not at the cave, she can't see it from her position, but toward the general area where the observation team hides. She knows they're there, or at least suspects. Around noon, something extraordinary happens. The juvenile appears on the southern beach, unusual as it typically stays in the northern territory. The 2 Spinosaurus engage in what can only be described as communication. The matriarch makes a series of low-frequency calls, deep rumbles that Kano feels in his chest more than hears. The juvenile responds with higher-pitched versions of the same call pattern. Then, incredibly, The matriarch begins demonstrating fishing techniques while the juvenile watches. She submerges in shallow water, shows the juvenile how to position the head to create minimal disturbance, demonstrates the rapid strike technique. The juvenile practices, failing twice before succeeding on the third attempt. The matriarch makes an approving call. Kano is certain of it, and both creatures continue fishing side by side for roughly 20 minutes before the juvenile moves back toward the northern beach. Teaching, Koa whispers, awed despite himself. She's actively teaching it. This observation changes everything. They're not dealing with simple animals. They're facing creatures with cultural knowledge transfer, with generational learning, with the kind of intelligence that made humans the dominant species. Except humans evolved those traits over millions of years, starting from relatively weak physiology. Spinosaurus has those traits while being perfectly designed killing machines. Meanwhile, on the northern side of the island, Malo's team makes their own disturbing discoveries. The juvenile is more active, more curious, and more dangerous than they'd estimated. While the matriarch follows predictable patterns, the juvenile explores. Malo's team watches it investigate tide pools, probe shallow caves, dig in the sand with its claws, and even attempt to catch birds. Unsuccessful, but the effort demonstrates versatility in prey selection. Most concerning, the juvenile finds the tribe's old beach camp. For nearly 30 minutes, it examines everything they left behind: the fire pit, the damaged third canoe, scattered supplies. It's not mindless investigation. The creature systematically checks each item, sometimes using its claws to manipulate objects, clearly trying to understand what these strange new island residents are and what they do. Then it does something that makes Roko's blood freeze. It follows the tribe's trail. The path they took up the hillside on day 2 is still visible. Disturbed vegetation, footprints in mud, broken branches. The juvenile follows this trail for roughly 50 meters before stopping, tilting its head upward toward the hillside, and making a series of calls that sound questioning. "It's tracking us," Soru whispers, "like a hunting dog." They remain hidden, motionless, barely breathing. The juvenile spends another 10 minutes investigating the trail before returning to the beach. But the message is clear. The tribe's location is no longer secret. The creatures know where they are. Both observation teams return to the cave by mid-afternoon, comparing notes and findings. The picture that emerges is grim, but informative. They now understand. Territorial behavior. The matriarch controls the southern third of the island, the juvenile the northern third. The central area, including the cave, is contested or neutral ground. Both creatures venture there, but neither dominates it. Activity patterns. Peak hunting hours are early morning and late afternoon. Midday is rest and thermoregulation time. Nighttime activity is minimal. Both creatures appear to be primarily diurnal, which gives the tribe some advantage if they're willing to risk nighttime resource gain. Dietary needs. Based on observed hunting success, each creature needs roughly 50 to 100 kilograms of food daily. That's a lot of fish, which means they're constantly hunting. This is actually good news. As long as aquatic prey remains abundant, the creatures have no incentive to hunt more dangerous terrestrial prey like humans. Intelligence levels. Both creatures demonstrate problem-solving, learning, memory, and communication. The matriarch shows teaching behavior. The juvenile shows exploratory curiosity. They're not sapient, but they're far more intelligent than crocodiles or other modern reptiles. Physical capabilities. The matriarch can swim powerfully, run at surprising speeds on land for short bursts, climb moderate terrain, and remain underwater for several minutes. The juvenile is likely faster, but less powerful. Both have excellent vision, good hearing, and probably decent olfactory senses. This information is compiled by Kano into what he half-jokingly calls the Academy of Blood, their systematic study of the predators that want to eat them. It's survival strategy informed by scientific observation, and it's their best hope for lasting the remaining 3 weeks. But as evening falls on day 8, the information gathering is interrupted by a sound from the cave's interior, the sharp, powerful cry of a newborn baby. Lyra has survived childbirth. The baby, a girl, is small, premature, but alive and loud. Pua emerges from the private area, exhausted but triumphant, holding the tiny bundle. "She's healthy," Pua announces. "Lyra is weak, but will recover. We have a new life on this island." The tribe gathers around, and for a few moments, the horror of their situation fades. This tiny creature, born in a cave on an island of monsters, represents something profound: continuity, hope, the will to survive not just individually, but as a people. Lyra names her daughter Moana, ocean, because it was the ocean that brought them here and will be the ocean that eventually takes them home, assuming they live long enough to leave. The celebration is brief. Babies need quiet, rest, and recovery. But that night, as guards rotate at the cave entrance and the rest of the tribe tries to sleep, there's a subtle shift in morale. They've survived 8 days. They've gathered crucial intelligence. They've defended themselves, and now they have a future to protect that's more tangible than abstract survival. Day 9 brings the first attempt at offensive strategy. Koa has been thinking constantly about the spear, their one serious weapon. It's designed for thrusting, not throwing, and it requires multiple people to wield effectively. But what if they made more? What if they created weapons specifically designed to injure these creatures? He proposes an ambitious project. Construct multiple long spears, sharpen them, fire-harden them, and set them as fixed defensive positions around key areas: the cave entrance, the stream fishing spots, the major trails. Not to kill the Spinosaurus, but to create physical barriers that force them to choose paths the tribe controls. The proposal generates fierce debate. Elder Kano argues that fortifications might anger the creatures, provoke them into more aggressive behavior. Malo counters that they've already been aggressive. Taku is dead. People have been hunted. Defensive preparations aren't provocations, they're necessities. The compromise: build the fortifications, but do so gradually, quietly, presenting them as passive obstacles rather than active threats. Make the island increasingly inconvenient for the Spinosaurus to hunt humans, while remaining neutral about their fishing and normal territorial behaviors. Over days 9 and 10, the tribe becomes a weapons factory. Every available person participates in creating defensive infrastructure. They cut and sharpen a dozen more long spears, embedding them point outward in the ground around the cave entrance in a defensive circle. Any creature approaching directly would have to navigate through them. They construct camouflaged pit traps along 2 major trails, shallow pits lined with sharpened stakes and covered with woven palm fronds. Not deep enough to seriously harm a Spinosaurus, but enough to cause pain and create associations. approaching the human area causes discomfort. They improve their fire distribution system, maintaining 4 constant fire sources instead of 2, creating a perimeter of light and heat that most animals instinctively avoid. Most innovatively, young Manu suggests using the abundant vines to create early warning systems. They string vines across key approach paths at ankle height, or what would be ankle height for a Spinosaurus, connecting them to suspended coconut shells and stones. Anything large crossing the trip vines will create noise, alerting the guards. It's primitive military engineering, but it works. On day 10 evening, the juvenile attempts to approach the cave during twilight, the first time either creature has tried a direct approach to their fortified position. It encounters the tripvine system, which creates a tremendous racket. The guards immediately sound the alarm, and 10 people rush to the cave entrance with weapons and torches. The juvenile stops approximately 30 meters away. For a long moment, creature and humans stare at each other across the defensive perimeter. Then, demonstrating exactly the kind of learning ability they've been documenting, the juvenile turns and leaves, but slowly, deliberately. A retreat, not a rout. "It's testing our defenses," Koa observes, "probing for weaknesses." "Then we show no weakness," Kano replies firmly. Days 11 and 12 bring a new crisis. Food. The fish traps are productive, providing roughly 5 to 8 kilograms of fish daily, enough to keep the tribe from starvation, but not thriving. The coconuts are being depleted faster than they regenerate. And most concerning, people are showing signs of nutritional deficiencies. The children are listless. Several adults have developed mouth sores. Pua recognizes the symptoms. They need fruits, vegetables, diverse nutrients that fish and coconuts alone cannot provide. But every edible plant they've found grows in areas the Spinosaurus frequent. The island's interior has wild bananas, breadfruit trees, and clusters of edible ferns. But reaching them requires either passing through creature territories or venturing far from the cave's safety. Koa proposes what he calls speed foraging, quick raids into resource-rich areas during the Spinosaurus's predictable rest periods, grabbing maximum nutrition in minimum time, then retreating before the creatures become active again. The first speed foraging mission launches on day 12 at precisely noon, when both creatures should be in their thermoregulation rest cycles. 8 people, the fastest runners, the sharpest observers, descend toward a breadfruit grove they'd spotted during earlier reconnaissance. The grove is located in neutral territory, roughly equidistant from both the matriarch's southern domain and the juvenile's northern range. The breadfruits are ripe, abundant, and desperately needed. The team moves in, working frantically to harvest as much as possible into woven carrying baskets. They have 12 minutes. Kano's calculations suggest that's the safe window. They work for 10, gathering perhaps 15 kilograms of breadfruit and several hands of small bananas. Then Dane, who's been assigned as lookout, hisses the alarm. Movement. Southern approach. The matriarch is coming. Not running, not hunting, just walking toward them with that same deliberate, patient gait they've come to. She's not supposed to be active yet. They've miscalculated, or she's adapted her schedule. The team runs, not toward the cave. That would be leading the creature directly to their main sanctuary. Instead, they scatter in 3 groups, using the pre-planned escape routes they'd mapped. The strategy is to confuse the predator, force it to choose which group to pursue, and hope the others escape. The matriarch chooses Koa's group, himself, young Sila, and Roko. The chase is terrifying. The creature accelerates, moving faster than seems possible for something so massive. But the jungle terrain works in the humans' favor. The dense vegetation that they can duck through, slide under, and squeeze between becomes obstacles for the Spinosaurus. She has to force her way through, smashing ferns, breaking branches, creating a trail of destruction. Koa's group reaches their emergency fallback position, a cluster of the largest cycad trees on the island, growing so close together that the gaps between trunks are barely wide enough for a person. They dive into the center of this natural fortress just as the matriarch arrives. She circles the cycad cluster, probing with her snout, trying different angles. But the trees are too close, too strong. She can't force her way in without risking injury. For nearly 20 minutes she tries. Then, showing that capacity for patience and strategic thinking they've documented, she settles down 30 meters away. Another siege situation. But this time, Koa has a plan. He sends Sila, the smallest, fastest member of their group, to slip out the opposite side of the cycad cluster and run for help. The girl is terrified but brave. She waits until the matriarch is focused on probing the cluster's northern side, then bolts from the southern edge. The matriarch notices and starts to pursue, but Koa and Roko immediately create a distraction, shouting, throwing stones, waving a burning brand they'd been carrying for exactly this. The creature has to make a choice: pursue the fleeing prey or deal with the annoying ones creating immediate discomfort. She chooses the immediate threat, turning back to the cycad cluster. Sila escapes. 40 minutes later, a full rescue party arrives. 12 people, multiple torches, and the big spear carried by 4 strong hunters. The show of force is enough. The matriarch, demonstrating cost-benefit analysis that any modern predator would recognize, withdraws. The humans aren't worth this much effort. Not yet. The foraging mission is deemed a partial success. They got the food, but nearly lost people. The tribe council debates whether to try again. They have to. The nutritional needs are undeniable. But they need better timing, better coordination, and better understanding of the creature's adaptation rate. Day 13 brings an unexpected discovery that changes their entire strategic picture. Manu, who's been spending his days studying the creatures with obsessive focus, his way of processing trauma, notices something nobody else has. He's been watching the matriarch from various observation points, and he realizes that her favorite sunrock isn't random. It's positioned perfectly to catch morning and early afternoon sun while being sheltered from the afternoon wind. More importantly, there's a specific approach path she uses almost invariably when going to and from that rock. It's a pattern, a predictable, exploitable pattern. The boy presents his observation to the tribe council that evening, using charcoal sketches on a flat rock to demonstrate the routes and timing. Kano listens with growing excitement. If they can predict where the matriarch will be at specific times with high reliability, they can plan foraging missions around her schedule with much greater safety. We need the same information about the juvenile, Koa says immediately. For the next 2 days, days 14 and 15, multiple observation teams conduct intensive behavioral mapping of both creatures. It's dangerous, exhausting work. but the intelligence gathered is invaluable. The matriarch has 3 primary locations: the Sun Rock, midday; the Southern Fishing Zone, early morning and late afternoon; and a night resting area in a sheltered cove they'd previously not known about. The juvenile is more erratic, but has patterns. It explores the northern beaches in the morning, fishes in a specific deep pool around noon, and spends late afternoons attempting to hunt birds and small prey in the jungle edges. Both creatures make distinctive vocalizations before changing locations, possibly communication between them, possibly territorial announcements. Learning to recognize these calls provides early warning of movement. Neither creature hunts actively at night. They're not nocturnal. This confirms that nighttime, while psychologically terrifying, is actually the safest time for human movement. The tribe begins operating on what Koa calls predator schedules. They plan their daily activities around the creature's patterns, moving when the creatures rest, foraging when they hunt in distant areas, maintaining vigilance during overlap periods. It's working. Days 15 through 20 pass without serious incidents. The tribe settles into a brutal but sustainable routine. Morning, minimal activity. Stay in or near the cave while the matriarch hunts. Midday, speed foraging missions while both creatures rest and thermoregulate. Afternoon, water gathering, fish trap checking, weapon maintenance. Evening, fortification improvements, tool making, food preparation. Night, rotating guards but generally safe periods for maintenance work around the camp. The psychological adaptation is remarkable. People who 2 weeks ago were paralyzed with terror at the sight of the Spinosaurus now discuss them with the casual familiarity of neighbors. The matriarch is on her rock early today. The juvenile caught a large fish. It won't be hunting for hours. They're learning to coexist. But coexistence has limits, as day 14 brutally demonstrates. Lyra, still weak from childbirth but desperate to contribute, insists on joining a midday foraging mission. Pua argues against it, but Lyra is stubborn. She's nursing Moana and needs more calories than the others, which means more food gathering responsibility. The mission starts safely. 7 people, including Lyra, harvest edible ferns from a grove in the Central Territory. The matriarch is on her sun rock. The juvenile is at its fishing pool. Everything is going according to pattern. Then, baby Moana, strapped to Lyra's chest in a woven carrier, begins to cry. Not unusual, babies cry, but the sound carries in the jungle's humidity, and it attracts attention. The juvenile, which should have been fishing for another hour, appears at the grove's edge. It's not aggressive, not charging, just curious. The creature tilts its head, listening to this new sound it hasn't heard before. A high-pitched, rhythmic vocalization from this strange prey species. The foraging party freezes. Lyra desperately tries to quiet Moana, but hungry babies don't negotiate. The crying continues, and the juvenile approaches closer. Koa, who's leading the mission, makes a split-second decision. He has people create a wall between Lyra and the creature. 5 adults with weapons, standing shoulder to shoulder, making themselves as large and threatening as possible. Then he does something either brilliant or suicidal. He mimics the matriarch's low-frequency call. It's imperfect, human vocal cords unable to fully reproduce the deep rumbling, but it's recognizable. A territorial announcement, a challenge. The juvenile stops, clearly. That call means something to it, either a warning from the matriarch or a signal of another adult Spinosaurus in the area. It's young enough that caution overrides curiosity. The creature withdraws. The foraging party retreats immediately, Lyra sobbing with relief and fear. Moana still wailing. They make it back to the cave without further incident, but the close call forces a crucial conversation that evening. Babies are loud, Pua states the obvious. Moana will cry regularly for months. We can't have foraging missions compromised every time she's hungry or uncomfortable. Either Lyra and the baby stay in the cave permanently, or we find a way to dampen the sound. The solution they develop is ingenious but disturbing. They create a double-walled section in the cave's deepest recess, hanging multiple layers of woven palm fronds and packed mud to create sound insulation. When Moana needs to cry, and babies do, she can do so in this dampened area where the sound won't carry to the outside. It's a prison, in a sense. A necessary prison, but a prison nonetheless. Lyra accepts it with the resigned grace of a mother who understands that her child's safety demands sacrifice. As week 2 ends, day 14 of their island captivity, the tribe has transformed. They're no longer panicked refugees. They're systematic survivors. They've studied their enemies, mapped territories, established routines, created defenses, and learned to predict behavior. But they've also been changed by the island. The children are harder, quieter. The adults move with constant vigilance. Everyone sleeps poorly. And there's a numbness growing, a psychological adaptation to constant danger that worries Elder Kano. We're becoming like them, he confides to Koa during a late-night watch shift. Predatory in our thinking, always calculating threat and opportunity, always watching. We're losing our humanity to survival necessity. Koa understands but disagrees. We're discovering what humanity actually means. Our ancestors lived like this for hundreds of thousands of years, surrounded by predators, surviving through intelligence and cooperation. We've just forgotten. This island is reminding us. It's a philosophical debate they don't have energy to resolve. The more pressing question as week 3 approaches: how long can this balance last? The creatures are adapting to human presence. The humans are adapting to creature patterns. But something will break this equilibrium. The question is, what, when, and how catastrophically? Week 3. When hunger makes monsters. Day 15 dawns with an absence of sound. For 2 weeks, the tribe has woken to the distinctive calls of the Spinosaurus pair, the deep, resonant bellows of the matriarch echoing across the southern waters, the higher-pitched responses of the juvenile from the north. These vocalizations have become the island's morning alarm, as reliable as sunrise. The tribe has learned to interpret their nuances: territorial announcements, hunting signals, satisfaction calls after successful catches. This morning, silence. Koa notices it first during his pre-dawn watch shift. He waits, listening intently, but the expected calls never come. The ocean laps quietly against the shore. Birds begin their tentative morning songs. The wind rustles through the prehistoric ferns. But from the island's apex predators, nothing. When Elder Kano emerges from the cave, Koa immediately reports the anomaly. The old man's weathered face creases with concern. In his 7 decades of reading nature's patterns, studying how animals telegraph their conditions and intentions through behavior, unexpected silence is often more alarming than aggressive noise. Something has changed, Kano says quietly. We must discover what before it discovers us. By full sunrise, reconnaissance teams are deployed to both observation points. Koa leads the southern team toward the matriarch's. Malo takes the northern group to monitor the juvenile. Both teams move with extreme caution, weapons ready, every sense hyper-alert. Koa's team reaches their hidden observation point overlooking the southern beach and immediately understands why the morning was silent. The matriarch is there, but she's not engaged in her usual morning fishing routine. Instead, she's on the beach itself, working methodically along the waterline, pushing her massive snout into tide pools and crevices, digging with her powerful foreclaws. The behavior is frantic, desperate. After several minutes of observation, the pattern becomes clear. She's finding very little food. The fish populations, Rocco whispers, voicing what they're all thinking. They're depleting. It's an ecological reality they should have predicted. The island is small, roughly 3 square kilometers of land, with perhaps another square kilometer of shallow water hunting grounds. 2 large Spinosaurus have been feeding here intensively for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer if they were resident before the tribe arrived. The fish populations, crabs, sea turtles, and other aquatic prey would naturally decline under such predation pressure. They watch as the matriarch spends 90 minutes searching before finally catching a single large fish, perhaps 8 kilograms. It's barely a snack for a creature that needs 50 to 100 kilograms daily. She consumes it immediately, then continues searching with increasing frustration. More concerning, she's expanding her search pattern. Areas she previously ignored, rocky sections, deeper water farther from shore, and most alarmingly, the stream mouth where it flows into the ocean, are now being investigated. She's hungry enough to overcome her normal territorial conservatism. Malo's team reports similar findings from the northern section. The juvenile has abandoned its usual fishing pool, likely depleted, and is ranging widely along the coastline, investigating every possible food source with increasing desperation. The 2 creatures are going hungry, and hungry predators are dangerous predators. The tribe council convenes an emergency session in the cave. The strategic picture has shifted dramatically. For 2 weeks, we've coexisted because the Spinosaurus had abundant food sources that were easier to exploit than hunting humans, Kano explains, his teaching voice automatically engaging. Fish don't fight back. Fish don't use fire. Fish don't require the energy expenditure that terrestrial hunting demands. We've been safe because we weren't worth the effort. But now the fish are scarce, Pua continues the logic, which means we've gone from not worth the effort to possibly necessary, especially for the juvenile. It's younger, less experienced, more prone to taking risks. The debate becomes heated. Several younger members advocate for aggressive action, using their collective knowledge of the creature's patterns to set ambush traps, perhaps even attempting to kill one of them. Koa is surprisingly vocal in opposing this approach. We've observed their intelligence for 2 weeks. They learn, they adapt, they remember. If we attack and fail, which is likely given our weapons, we transform from neutral presence to active threat. They'll hunt us systematically. And if we attack and succeed in killing one, we might enrage the other into vendetta behavior. We've seen them communicate, teach, demonstrate emotional bonds. Killing the juvenile might make the matriarch relentlessly aggressive. Then what do? Demands Soru, Taku's brother, still carrying rage over his sibling's death. Wait for them to start picking us off one by one? Elder Kano proposes something unexpected. We help them hunt. The suggestion is met with stunned silence. Then incredulous. Help the creatures that killed Taku? Feed the monsters that have terrorized them for 2 weeks? It's madness. But as Kano explains his reasoning, a strange logic emerges. The tribe has one significant advantage. They can fish in deeper waters and use techniques the Spinosaurus cannot. They have boats, damaged but repairable. They have nets that were salvaged from the beach camp. They have knowledge of fish behavior and migratory patterns. If we can increase the available food supply through our fishing efforts, Kano explains, we reduce the creature's motivation to hunt us. We're managing the predator's food source to control their behavior. It's the same principle our ancestors used with wolves. Feed them, and they tolerate your presence. Starve them, and they see you as competition or food. It's deeply controversial. Half the tribe rebels at the idea of helping their tormentors. But the alternative, waiting for desperation-driven attacks, is worse. After hours of debate, a compromise emerges. They'll attempt to increase the island's fish populations by creating artificial reefs and fish aggregation points in the shallows. Not to feed the Spinosaurus directly, but to restore the ecological balance that keeps the creatures satiated and disinterested in human prey. It's a survival strategy unprecedented in human history. Ecological engineering to manage prehistoric predator behavior. Days 16 and 17 are consumed by this project. The tribe cannibalizes one of the damaged canoes, using its wood and materials to create fish aggregation structures. Frameworks of wood and stone placed in shallow water that attract fish seeking shelter. They also begin controlled fishing in deeper waters, carefully avoiding the Spinosaurus hunting zones, catching fish and releasing them in areas the creatures haven't depleted yet. It's exhausting, dangerous work. Every trip to the beaches risks encounters, but the alternative is unthinkable. On day 18, they get their first indication that the strategy might be working. The matriarch is observed fishing in an area where they'd released several catches the previous day. Her hunting is more successful, 4 large fish in 2 hours, instead of the single, desperate catch from 3 days ago. Her vocalizations change from the frustrated, aggressive calls they'd been hearing to something closer to the satisfied rumbles from week 1. But the juvenile is a different problem. The younger Spinosaurus hasn't adjusted its hunting strategy effectively. It's still searching depleted areas, still failing to find adequate food. Worse, it's becoming bolder. On day 18 afternoon, it approaches within 20 meters of the cave entrance, the closest either creature has come since the tribe established their fortifications. The tribe responds with their standard defense, a show of force. 10 people line the defensive perimeter, weapons ready, fires burning bright. They shout, bang on hollow logs to create noise, wave torches. For several tense minutes, the juvenile faces them, clearly calculating whether the risk is worth the potential reward. Then, something happens that forever changes young Manu's perspective on these creatures. The juvenile makes a sound they've never heard before. A high-pitched, almost plaintive call. Not aggressive, not territorial. It sounds like distress. The creature isn't challenging them, it's struggling. Manu, watching from behind the defensive line, suddenly recognizes what he's seeing. The juvenile is thin. Not dramatically so, but compared to observations from week 1, its body profile has changed. The hip bones are slightly more prominent. The sail membrane appears looser. The creature is suffering from sustained caloric deficit. "It's starving," the boy whispers. The observation ripples through the defenders. Seeing the juvenile not as an invincible monster, but as a struggling young animal desperately trying to survive, shifts something fundamental in their psychological relationship with these creatures. Kano makes a decision that's either compassionate or insane. He orders half the defenders to stand down, reducing the appearance of threat. Then he does something extraordinary. He has several large fish from their morning catch brought forward and thrown, not directly at the juvenile, but into the neutral space between humans and Dinosaur. "We're not feeding it," he explains quickly as several tribe members protest. "We're demonstrating that this area provides food resources, teaching it that proximity to humans doesn't mean threat or competition." The juvenile watches the fish land 15 meters away. For a long moment, it doesn't move. Then, with obvious caution, it approaches, snaps up the fish, and retreats. The entire exchange takes less than 30 seconds. It's not domestication. It's not friendship. It's the beginning of something far more complex. Negotiated coexistence between species that should be predator and prey, but have found themselves in a survival scenario that demands adaptation from both. Over the next 3 days, days 19, 20, and 21, this fragile new dynamic continues. The tribe maintains their fish aggregation project, increasing the available prey in the shallows. The matriarch's hunting improves noticeably. The juvenile, whether by learning or by luck, begins fishing more successfully. But more importantly, the attacks stop. The stalking stops. The siege behaviors stop. Both creatures still maintain their territories. Both still vocalize and patrol. But the desperate edge is gone. They're no longer looking at humans with the calculating gaze of predators assessing prey. They're looking at humans with the wary respect that intelligent animals show other intelligent animals, sharing a limited resource. It's a transformation that makes some tribe members deeply uncomfortable. Soru, in particular, struggles with this new dynamic. "Taku is dead," he reminds everyone during a heated evening debate. "Killed by that thing we're now feeding. How is this justice? How is this honor?" Kano's response is both gentle and brutally pragmatic. "Taku died because we were ignorant. We entered the water, the matriarch's hunting territory, without understanding what we faced. She killed him the way a fisherman catches tuna, not from malice, from hunger and territorial instinct. Would you seek vengeance against the ocean for drowning someone? Against fire for burning? These creatures are forces of nature. We can rage against them, or we can learn to navigate around them." "They're more than forces of nature," Pua adds. "They're thinking beings, which means they can learn, can adapt, can make choices. We're teaching them that humans are difficult, dangerous prey that aren't worth hunting when easier food exists. That's not betraying Taku. That's ensuring his death wasn't meaningless." The philosophical debate continues, but the practical reality is undeniable. The new strategy is working. Days 22 and 23 bring a development that demonstrates just how much both species have adapted. A storm hits the island. Not a catastrophic typhoon, but a significant tropical storm with heavy rain, high winds, and rough seas. The tribe retreats deep into the cave, maintaining fires but mostly waiting out the weather in damp misery. But where are the Spinosaurus during the storm? Observation parties, braving the weather for brief periods, discover something remarkable. Both creatures have sought shelter. The matriarch in her protected cove, the juvenile in a cluster of massive rocks on the northern beach. Both are essentially inactive, conserving energy, waiting for conditions to improve. It's a reminder that, despite their size and power, these creatures are vulnerable. They're adapted for specific conditions: warm, shallow waters for hunting, sunny periods for thermoregulation. The storm disrupts their routine as much as it disrupts the humans. When the storm passes on day 24, something unexpected occurs. The humans emerge from the cave to begin storm damage assessment. The Spinosaurus emerge from their shelters to resume hunting. And for the first time, both species go about their business in visible proximity without defensive aggression. Koa is checking the fish traps in the stream, accompanied by 4 guards as always, when the juvenile appears 50 meters upstream, also fishing. For a moment, everyone freezes. But the juvenile simply glances at the humans, makes a low, non-aggressive vocalization, and continues fishing. It's acknowledgement, recognition of shared space without challenge. The humans complete their fish trap checks. The juvenile catches several fish. Both parties leave the area without incident. "We've established territorial boundaries," Kano explains later, almost awed by what they've accomplished. Not through aggression or submission, but through mutual recognition of each other's needs and spaces. The stream is shared territory now. We fish in certain sections at certain times. They fish in other sections at other times. We're coexisting. But coexistence has costs, as the tribe is beginning to realize. The constant vigilance, the restricted movement, the inability to fully relax, these take psychological tolls. Several children are showing signs of what Pua recognizes as sustained stress: nightmares, bedwetting, emotional outbursts. The adults hide it better, but everyone is exhausted in ways that go beyond physical fatigue. And there are practical limitations. Baby Moana is thriving. Lyra's milk production is adequate, and the supplemental nutrition from improved foraging is helping. But she's still confined to the sound-dampened section of the cave for much of each. Lyra is beginning to show signs of depression, the isolation and confinement wearing on her mental health. The tribe needs more than survival. They need hope for escape. On day 25, Koa makes a proposal. Repair the 2 remaining canoes and scout for potential escape routes. Not to leave immediately, they're not ready for that, but to have options, to know that this island prison has doors, even if they're not yet ready to walk through them. The canoe repair project begins immediately. It's delicate work. The boats were damaged during the chaotic landing, and weeks of exposure to sun and salt have degraded materials. But the tribe has skilled craftspeople who've been building and repairing canoes for generations. The work takes place on the southern beach during the matriarch's predictable midday rest period. They move in shifts, 20 minutes of work, then retreat before the creature becomes active again. It's slow, but it's progress. By day 26, 1 canoe is seaworthy. It's a profound psychological victory. They test it in the shallows, confirming it can support 4 people and supplies. It's not enough to evacuate the entire tribe, but it's a start. It's possibility. That night, spirits are higher than they've been in nearly 3 weeks. Around the evening fire, there's actual laughter for the first time since the landing. The children, resilient as only children can be, play a game that would have been unthinkable a week ago. They mimic the Spinosaurus calls, competing to see who can make the most accurate imitation. It's disturbing and heartening simultaneously. They've been traumatized, but they're adapting. They're incorporating the horror into their lives and finding ways to process it. Elder Kano watches the children's play with complex emotions. These young people will carry these experiences for the rest of their lives. Some will be strengthened by it, survivors who faced the impossible, and others will be haunted by it, trauma that resurfaces in nightmares and anxiety for decades. But they'll all be changed. The innocence of their previous island life, fishing, gathering, living in harmony with a relatively gentle ecosystem, is gone forever. They've seen the world's true face, beautiful, brutal, and utterly indifferent to human notions of fairness or meaning. Day 27 brings a reminder that adaptation is never complete, and that nature always has more lessons to teach. A foraging party working in the breadfruit grove, the same location where they'd had the close call with the juvenile 2 weeks prior, makes a discovery that shifts their entire understanding of the island's history. Beneath the rotting vegetation and volcanic soil, they uncover bones. But not recent bones. These are fossilized, partially mineralized, suggesting they've been here for thousands or possibly tens of thousands of years. And they're not from sea creatures or fish. They're terrestrial dinosaur bones, large, robust, belonging to some massive herbivore. Kano examines the findings with growing excitement and dread. The implications are staggering. This island has supported dinosaur populations before, he explains to the assembled tribe that evening. Not recently, these bones are ancient. But at some point in deep history, this place was part of a larger landmass, or had connections to dinosaur habitats, which means the Spinosaurus aren't anomalies, Koa finishes the thought. They're remnants, survivors from a population that's been here, isolated, for thousands or millions of years. It recontextualizes everything. The intelligence, the adaptability, the unexpected behaviors. These aren't aberrations. They're the result of countless generations of isolated evolution. Island species that diverged from their mainland ancestors, became more intelligent, more specialized, more capable of thriving in limited territory. The tribe has stumbled onto a lost world, a pocket ecosystem where extinction never occurred. How many more might there be? Young Sila asks, voicing the question everyone is thinking. If there are 2 Spinosaurus, what else survived here? It's a terrifying thought. So far, they've only encountered the 2 semi-aquatic predators, but an ecosystem this complex might support other species. Smaller predators, herbivores, entire food webs that science believes disappeared 65 million years ago. The tribe's understanding of their situation shifts again. They're not just stranded survivors managing dangerous wildlife. They're explorers who've discovered something that shouldn't exist. Living proof that Earth's deep history isn't as concluded as anyone believed. As week 3 draws to a close, day 28 of their island captivity, the tribe takes stock of their situation. Survival status? All 22 members alive and mostly healthy. Moana is thriving. Nutritional deficiencies improving. Injuries from the initial landing healed. Food situation. Sustainable through combination of fish traps, foraging, and ecological management of the Spinosaurus hunting grounds. Water situation. Adequate. Multiple known sources, safe collection routes established. Shelter situation. The cave is secure, fortified, and psychologically stable. Predator situation. Both Spinosaurus appear satiated and non-aggressive. Territorial boundaries established and mostly respected by all parties. Escape situation. 1 canoe repaired, 2nd nearing completion. But where would they go? That last question haunts them as they prepare for week 4, the final week of what they'd originally conceived as their survival timeline. 1 month to wait out the volcanic eruptions on the main island. 1 month to survive before attempting return. But intelligence gathered from watching the distant main island suggests the eruptions are ongoing. The orange glow of lava is still visible. Ash columns still rise during the day. The waters between islands are still filled with floating pumice and debris. They're not going home in week 4. They might not be going home for months. That realization forces a profound psychological shift. They're no longer temporary refugees waiting for rescue or safe return. They're colonists, involuntary colonists on an island that exists outside normal time, sharing space with creatures that ruled Earth when human ancestors were still tiny mammals hiding in trees. On the evening of day 28, Elder Kano calls the tribe together for what he calls a truth ceremony, a ritual from their cultural tradition used when communities face existential transitions. "We came here fleeing fire and seeking safety," he begins, his weathered voice carrying the weight of all 7 decades of his life. "We found neither. We found a different kind of fire, the constant burn of fear and vigilance, and a different kind of safety, not the safety of protection, but the safety that comes from understanding danger." He pauses, looking at each face illuminated by firelight. Children whose eyes have seen too much. Adults whose bodies bear the scars of this brutal month. A newborn who knows no other world. "We've lost Taku. We've been terrified, challenged, pushed to edges we didn't know we possessed. But we've also learned what our ancestors knew, that humans survive not through strength or weapons, but through intelligence, cooperation, and the willingness to adapt. Tomorrow begins our 4th week on this island. It will not be our last. The volcanoes haven't quieted. The way home isn't open. We must accept that this place, this impossible, terrible, wondrous place, is our home now. Not forever, but for now. So we stop counting days until escape. We start building a life that can sustain us for as long as necessary. We're no longer refugees. We're the Marawai people of the Island of Ghosts. He uses the name that's been emerging organically in their conversations. And we will endure. It's not a celebration. It's not optimistic. It's simply acknowledgement of reality, spoken with the quiet dignity of people who've learned to face truth without flinching. As the ceremony concludes and people return to their sleeping areas, young Manu approaches his grandfather. The boy has been largely silent since Taku's death, processing trauma through observation and learning rather than words. "Grandfather," Manu says quietly, "the Spinosaurus, are they evil?" Kano considers the question seriously. It's not childish inquiry. It's philosophical depth from someone who's witnessed violence and is trying to understand its meaning. "No," Kano finally replies. "They're no more evil than the ocean or the volcano. They're powerful forces that can destroy us if we're careless or unlucky. But they're also just animals trying to survive, just like us. They hunt because they're hungry. They defend territory because they need resources. They kill because that's what predators do. Uncle Taku died because we were in the wrong place without proper knowledge. The matriarch didn't kill him from cruelty. She killed him because he was prey that entered her hunting ground. It's horrible. It's tragic. But it's not personal. Not evil. Just nature." Manu thinks about this for a long moment. Then, "When I grow up, I want to understand them. Really understand them. Learn everything about how they live and think and survive, so no one else has to die from ignorance." Kano embraces his grandson, pride and sorrow mixing in his weathered heart. The boy has found purpose in trauma. It's how humans transform suffering into meaning. As week 3 ends and week 4 begins, the Island of Ghosts settles into an uneasy equilibrium. Humans and Spinosaurus share territory, neither dominant, both adapted to each other's presence. It's not peace. It's managed coexistence between species separated by 65 million years of evolution, but united by the universal imperatives of survival. But equilibrium is always temporary, and on an island where the impossible exists as daily reality, where prehistoric predators think and learn and adapt, where humans have been forced to remember ancestral skills they'd forgotten, something will break the balance. The question is only when, and whether the tribe will survive what comes next. Week 4. The choice between devils. Day 29 begins with a sound that shouldn't exist. Koa is on dawn watch when he hears it, a distant, rhythmic splashing from the northern side of the island. Not the usual sounds of the juvenile fishing. Those are familiar now, part of the island's morning symphony. This is different. Multiple impacts, coordinated, almost mechanical in its regularity. He wakes 2 other guards, and they move quietly to the observation point overlooking the northern beaches. What they see makes no immediate sense, then slowly resolves into something both hopeful and terrifying. A canoe. Not one of theirs. This vessel is larger, built in a different style with an outrigger for stability. And it's approaching the island, paddled by what appears to be 6 people. Survivors. Other refugees from the volcanic catastrophe, perhaps, or traders blown off course, or another coastal tribe seeking sanctuary. The tribe has spent 4 weeks convinced they were alone in this nightmare. The sudden appearance of other humans is jarring, disorienting, wonderful, and immediately complicated. Because the canoe is heading directly toward the northern beach, the juvenile's primary territory. Koa makes a split-second decision. He sends one runner back to wake the tribe and another to race down the hillside toward the beach, hoping to intercept the newcomers before they land. But it's nearly a kilometer of difficult terrain, and the canoe is already entering the shallows. He's too late. The 6 people beach their canoe and step onto the sand with the relieved exhaustion of people who've been at sea for too long. They're similar in appearance to the Marawai, coastal people, dark-skinned and lean, wearing minimal clothing and carrying basic supplies. One appears to be injured, supported by 2 others. A woman who might be their leader scans the beach, clearly assessing whether this island offers the salvation they desperately need. Then the juvenile rises from the water behind them. It's been hunting in the shallows. They paddled directly over its position without realizing. The creature surfaces like a nightmare emerging from the deep, water cascading off its massive sail, jaws opening in what might be surprise or opportunity. The newcomer's reaction is immediate and completely wrong. They don't form a defensive group or attempt to make themselves threatening. They panic. 3 of them run directly inland toward the jungle. 2 try to push the canoe back into the water. The injured one simply collapses in terror. The juvenile, presented with scattering prey exhibiting classic flight behavior, does what any predator would do. It pursues. Koa is still 200 meters away, crashing through the undergrowth, screaming warnings that can't possibly be heard over the newcomer's screams. He watches in horror as the juvenile closes the distance to the collapsed man in seconds, moving with that terrifying aquatic grace on land. The attack is swift and brutal. The juvenile's jaws close on the man's torso exactly as they did with Taku 4 weeks ago. The creature shakes its head violently, and the man's screams cut off with awful finality. Then the juvenile drags the body into the shallows, exactly repeating the behavioral pattern the tribe has documented extensively. But the difference this time is crucial. Koa has 4 weeks of knowledge that these newcomers lack. He reaches the beach as the juvenile is retreating with its prey. The remaining 5 newcomers are scattered, paralyzed with terror, completely vulnerable. Koa does something that would have seemed insane a month ago, but now makes perfect strategic sense. He positions himself between the juvenile and the remaining humans, weapons raised, and makes the deep, rumbling call he's been practicing, the territorial vocalization that mimics the matriarch. Then he adds his own innovation. He throws a burning branch he'd grabbed during his descent, landing it directly in the juvenile's path, creating a barrier of fire. The juvenile stops. It already has prey, the dead man secured in its jaws. And here's an obstacle it's learned to respect over the past 2 weeks. Fire wielded by the strange bipedal creatures that have proven more trouble than they're worth. The cost-benefit calculation runs quickly through its predatory brain. It withdraws into deeper water, taking its kill, satisfied enough not to press the encounter. Koa immediately takes command of the situation, his voice sharp with urgency. "Stop running! Form a group, now!" The newcomers, shocked and traumatized, somehow obey. They cluster together on the beach, weapons clutched uselessly, staring at Koa like he's a ghost. Which, from their perspective, he might be. A wild man emerging from the jungle, speaking their language, seemingly controlling a prehistoric monster with fire and sounds. "How many are in your group?" Koa demands. We were 6, the woman who appears to be their leader stammers. "Now 5. We've been at sea for 9 days. The volcano, our village, we were the only boat that escaped. Come with me, quickly. This beach isn't safe. Neither creature." "Creatures? There's more than one." "There are 2. You just met the smaller one. Move, now." Questions later. Koa leads the shell-shocked newcomers up the hillside toward the cave, taking the safest route, moving fast but not running. Running triggers predator pursuit instincts. Behind them, from the northern waters, they hear the juvenile making satisfied feeding sounds. It's a horror the newcomers will never unhear. The integration of 5 traumatized strangers into the tribe's carefully constructed survival system creates immediate complications. Elder Kano welcomes them with the traditional hospitality their culture demands, offering water, food, and shelter without hesitation. But he also immediately establishes ground rules. "You're safe here, but safety requires discipline. We've spent 4 weeks learning to survive on this island. You'll learn our protocols, follow our guard rotations, and obey commands without question when we encounter the Spinosaurus. Understood?" The newcomers, identifying themselves as members of the Kalani tribe from an island 3 days paddle south, nod numbly. Their leader, a woman named Iona, has the hollowed-out look of someone who's witnessed too much tragedy in too short a time. "Our entire village was destroyed," she explains during the midday briefing. "The earthquake started 5 days before we left. Then the volcano. The lava flows reached the ocean. The steam explosions, the ash clouds. We loaded everyone we could into 3 canoes. We've been at sea ever since, running low on water, hoping to find any island that wasn't erupting." "The other 2 canoes?" Pua asks gently. Iona's face answers before her words do. "Lost in a storm 3 days ago. We thought we were the only survivors of our entire people. Now we're 5. And Mako..." She trails off, unable to finish the sentence about the man the juvenile killed less than an hour ago. The Kalani survivors bring valuable resources, supplies that the Marawai had lost, including better rope, a metal knife, precious beyond measure, fishing hooks, and salt-preserved food. But they also bring something less tangible and more problematic: fresh trauma and no adaptive knowledge. While the Marawai tribe has spent 4 weeks learning to read the Spinosaurus's behavior patterns and manage coexistence, the Kalani survivors see only monsters that killed their companion. They're operating on pure, unfiltered terror. This becomes a dangerous problem on day 30, when one of the Kalani survivors, a young man named Tane, spots the matriarch fishing in the southern shallows, and without consulting anyone, attempts to kill it. He takes one of the fire-hardened spears and moves down the hillside alone, apparently convinced he can ambush the creature while it's distracted by hunting. It's breathtakingly reckless, born of trauma and rage, and complete ignorance of what the tribe has learned. Manu spots him descending and immediately alerts Koa. A rescue party mobilizes instantly, but Tane has a head start and is moving fast, driven by something beyond rational thought. They reach the beach just as Tane is positioning himself behind a rock formation, spear raised, waiting for the matriarch to come within range. The creature is 30 meters offshore, completely absorbed in fishing, utterly unaware of the threat. Koa has perhaps 15 seconds to make a decision that will define everything. If Tane throws that spear and injures the matriarch, even superficially, the delicate balance they've established shatters. The creature will associate humans with pain and threat. It might flee, or it might attack with the full ferocity of a territorial apex predator that's been challenged. He tackles Tane from behind, driving him into the sand, clamping a hand over the younger man's mouth to prevent any outcry. The spear skitters across. 2 other tribe members grab Tane's arms and drag him back toward the jungle before the matriarch notices the commotion. The matriarch does notice. She stops fishing and looks directly at the beach, head tilted in that unnervingly intelligent way they've documented. For a long moment, she simply observes the humans who've suddenly appeared in her peripheral territory. Then, having assessed them as non-threatening based on 4 weeks of established patterns, she returns to fishing. Crisis averted. Barely. Back at the cave, the confrontation is heated. Tane is unrepentant, insisting he was trying to protect the group by eliminating one of the threats. Koa's response is sharp and uncompromising. "You weren't protecting us. You were indulging your trauma." "I understand. Believe me, I understand. We've all lost people. Taku was my friend, my hunting partner. But he died because we didn't know what we were facing. Now we do know. And what we know is that these creatures can be managed through intelligent behavior, not brave stupidity." "They're monsters," Tane shouts. "They killed Mako. They killed your friend. How can you just accept that?" "Because acceptance isn't surrender. It's survival," Elder Kano interjects, his voice carrying decades of hard-earned wisdom. "Young man, you come from a place where humans were apex predators, where the biggest threats were storms and sharks. We did too. But this island has taught us that we're not always at the top of the food chain. Sometimes we're the prey. And prey species survive through intelligence, not aggression." The philosophical lesson is lost on Tane in his current state, but it resonates with Iona. She's a leader who understands pragmatism. Over the next day, she works with her people to help them understand the reality. Resistance born from emotion will get them killed. Adaptation born from observation might keep them alive. Days 31 and 32 become an intensive crash course in Spinosaurus studies for the Kalani survivors. They're taken to observation points, shown the behavioral patterns, taught the warning signs and safe responses. Malo demonstrates the vocal mimicry that can sometimes deter approaches. Pua explains the territorial boundaries that have been established. It's like compressing 4 weeks of learning into 48 hours. It's imperfect, but it's necessary. During this process, Iona asks a question that's been troubling Koa as well. Has anyone explored the entire island? Are we certain there are only 2 of these creatures? The answer, disturbingly, is no. The tribe has mapped perhaps 60% of the island's surface, focusing on resource-rich areas and safe routes. But there are sections, particularly the steep, densely vegetated southwestern quadrant, that remain unexplored because they're difficult to access and seemed to offer minimal resources. Koa proposes a full island survey for day 33. Multiple teams will conduct simultaneous exploration of the unmapped areas, finally answering the question of what else might exist here. It's risky. They'll be spreading their forces thin, but the knowledge is crucial, especially now that their population has grown to 27 people. The survey launches at dawn on day 33 with 3 teams. Team 1, Koa, Roko, Iona, Tane, will explore the southwestern quadrant, the largest unmapped area. Team 2, Malo, Dane, 2 Kalani survivors, will circumnavigate the island by canoe, mapping the coastline and underwater features. Team 3, young Manu, Sila, and 2 other sharp-eyed youngsters supervised by a guard, will explore the inland caves and volcanic formations. Elder Kano remains at the main cave with the majority of the tribe, including Lyra and baby Moana, maintaining the secure base. Team 1's exploration of the southwestern quadrant yields discoveries both wondrous and unsettling. The terrain here is dramatically different from the rest of the island. Older volcanic formations creating a mini gorge where a seasonal stream has carved through ancient lava. The vegetation is denser, older growth suggesting this area has been undisturbed for longer periods. And there are more bones. Not just scattered remnants like they found earlier, but a significant deposit. Dozens of fossilized skeletons from multiple species. Koa, who's been learning to identify different dinosaur types from his observations, recognizes at least 3 distinct body plans. Large herbivores, smaller bipedal creatures, and, most concerning, massive skulls with teeth designed for rending flesh. "This was a predator trap," Iona says, her voice hushed with awe. "Some natural feature, maybe the gorge flooded seasonally, concentrated dying animals here over thousands of years. It's a fossil bed." But if it's a fossil bed from ancient history, why does some of the bone look less fossilized than others? Why are there partial skeletons that seem to have connective tissue remnants? The answer comes when Tane, exploring the gorge's upper edge, finds a crevice that opens into a larger chamber. Inside, he discovers something that shouldn't exist: a nesting site. Not an ancient one, a recent one. The chamber is roughly 8 meters across, naturally heated by volcanic vents that create a warm, humid environment. And in the center, arranged with obvious care, is a nest, a circular depression lined with vegetation and eggs. 3 eggs, each roughly 30 centimeters long, leathery shelled, unmistakably reptilian. And they're fresh. One shows movement. Something inside is alive, growing, preparing to hatch. The team stares in stunned silence. The implications cascade like dominoes. The matriarch and juvenile aren't just survivors sharing territory. They're a breeding pair. Or were a breeding pair. These eggs might have been laid before the current situation developed. The island's Spinosaurus population isn't just two isolated individuals. It's a functioning reproductive population. There could be more. There might have been more in the past. This fossil record might include relatively recent specimens. Most critically, these eggs will hatch. Soon, based on the movement Tane observed. And when they do, there will be 3 juvenile Spinosaurus on this island, requiring massive amounts of food, protected by at least one fiercely defensive adult. "We need to destroy them," Tane says immediately. "Now, before they hatch. 3 less monsters to worry about." Koa's response is instant and sharp. "Touch those eggs and you've declared war on both adult Spinosaurus. They know these eggs. This is their territory. You think the matriarch is dangerous now? Wait until you've threatened her offspring. She'll hunt every human on this island with single-minded determination." "So what do we do?" Iona asks. "Just let them hatch? Accept that our food competition is about to increase by 3 more predators?" It's Manu, the youngest member of the survey team, who offers the most profound observation. "If the eggs are here, in this protected chamber, and both adults know about them, why haven't they hatched already? Look at the nest. It's maintained, but it's not actively incubated. I think they're waiting for conditions to be right. Food availability, maybe. Or territory security." The boy is demonstrating the observational brilliance that's been developing over the past month. He's right. The nest shows signs of regular checking, but not constant attendance. The eggs are in a kind of suspended development, triggered by environmental cues that haven't occurred yet. The food scarcity last week, Koa realizes. When the fish populations dropped, the adults weren't getting enough calories. In that condition, they couldn't support hatchlings. So the eggs wait. And now that food is recovering, they might hatch soon, Iona finishes. Days, maybe a week at most. Team 1 returns to the main cave with this devastating intelligence. The tribe council convenes immediately to discuss options. The debate is fierce and reveals deep philosophical divisions. Aggressive faction, led by some of the younger Kalani survivors. Destroy the eggs now while we can. Yes, it risks retaliation, but having 5 Spinosaurus instead of 2 is suicide. Coexistence faction, led by Kano and Pua. The eggs represent a line we cannot cross. Destroying them declares total war. Better to adapt to increased population through better resource management. Escape faction, led by some original Marawai members. Use this as the motivation to finally leave. We have 2 repaired canoes now, with the addition of the Kalani boat. We can evacuate in waves, risk the open ocean rather than remain on an island with breeding predators. Strategic faction, led by Koa and Iona. Study the situation more before deciding. We need information from the other survey teams before making irrevocable choices. While this debate rages in the cave, Team 2, the coastal survey canoe, makes its own critical discovery. Circling the island, they identify what appears to be a second, smaller island, roughly 5 kilometers to the northwest. It's tiny, perhaps 1/10 the size of Ghost Island, but it's visible even from sea level, which means it has elevation. And most importantly, smoke rises from it. Not volcanic smoke, cooking fire smoke. Other survivors, other humans, close enough to potentially reach in a few hours of paddling. Team 3, exploring the inland caves, makes a discovery that's less immediately dramatic, but perhaps more scientifically profound. In the deepest cave they explore, they find ancient pictographs, stone carvings created by human hands, possibly thousands of years. The images are crude but unmistakable. Humans hunting large animals, humans fleeing from massive predators, humans living in caves, and, most intriguingly, humans apparently coexisting with dinosaurs. One image clearly shows a creature matching the Spinosaurus profile alongside human figures who aren't fleeing, but standing their ground with spears. Ancient peoples lived here, young Scylla breathes in awe. They knew these creatures. They survived them. It's archaeological evidence that the Marawai and Kalani aren't the first humans to face this challenge. Others came before. Some survived long enough to leave records. Others, well, the skeleton they found with the carved warning in Latin demonstrates that not everyone made it. When all three teams report their findings, the tribe is overwhelmed with information, choices, and implications. Day 33 ends with more questions than answers. Should they destroy the eggs or leave them? Should they attempt contact with the other island's survivors? Should they commit to staying or prepare for mass evacuation? How do they process the archaeological evidence that humans once coexisted with these creatures for extended periods? Day 34 begins with an event that forces immediate decision. One of the eggs begins hatching. Manu, who's been secretly monitoring the nest site against orders, the boy's curiosity overcomes his obedience, races back to the cave with news. It's happening. The first egg is cracking. I saw the adult, the matriarch, I think, visiting the nest. She's agitated, protective. Within hours, maybe a day, there will be a hatchling. The tribe fractures. Some want to move against the nest immediately. Others argue that ship has sailed. Attacking a nest with a protective parent nearby is suicide. A third group advocates for immediate evacuation now, before the situation deteriorates further. Kano calls for calm and proposes something unexpected. We observe, we learn. A Spinosaurus hatching is something no living human has witnessed. The knowledge might save our lives. Manu, can you return to a safe observation point? The boy nods eagerly. He's already identified a position, a rocky outcrop 30 meters from the nest chamber, concealed by vegetation but with clear sight lines. Koa volunteers to accompany him. So does Iona, and surprisingly, Tane. The young man has been transformed by the past few days, his rage cooling into something like scientific curiosity. The observation party reaches their position by mid-morning. The matriarch is indeed at the nest, her massive body partially visible in the chamber entrance. They can hear sounds, low, rumbling vocalizations, gentle compared to her usual calls. She's talking to the eggs. Encouraging? Communicating? Impossible to say, but it's clearly intentional vocalization. Around noon, the first hatchling emerges. It's simultaneously alien and familiar, roughly the size of a large chicken, covered in downy proto-feathers rather than scales, with disproportionately large head and feet. The tiny sail on its back is folded close to the body, barely noticeable. Its eyes are open immediately, alert, aware. The matriarch responds with a sound none of them have heard before, a soft, trilling whistle, almost musical. The hatchling responds with a tiny, high-pitched version of the same call. Communication between parent and offspring, recognition, bonding. The second egg hatches 30 minutes later. Same process. The hatchlings immediately begin moving, exploring their nest area, snapping at insects, demonstrating coordination and awareness that's startling for newborns. The third egg doesn't hatch. Something is wrong with it. The shell appears too thick or the occupant too weak. The matriarch notices, examines it carefully, then does something that stops the observers' hearts. She gently breaks the shell with her teeth, assisting the hatchling's emergence. Tool use. Problem solving. Active parental care, beyond simple protection. This isn't just a reptilian predator. It's a sophisticated caregiver displaying behaviors more commonly associated with mammals and birds. The third hatchling is smaller, weaker, but alive. The matriarch keeps it close, seems to focus additional attention on it, compensating for its vulnerability. Then the juvenile arrives. The observation team tenses, expecting territorial aggression or even infanticide. Common behaviors in crocodilian species where males sometimes kill young that aren't their own. But what happens instead is remarkable. The juvenile approaches the nest cautiously, making submissive postures and vocalizations. The matriarch responds with what can only be described as introduction calls. The juvenile examines the hatchlings carefully, touching them gently with its snout, and then begins regurgitating partially digested fish near the nest. It's feeding behavior. Provisioning. The juvenile is actively participating in care for hatchlings that might not even be its offspring. Pack behavior, family structure, social complexity that rivals wolves or dolphins. The observation team watches for 6 hours, documenting everything. The hatchlings eat, sleep, explore their immediate area under constant supervision. Both adults take turns guarding and hunting. The parents don't leave the nest area undefended for even a moment. When the observers finally retreat as evening approaches, they carry information that changes everything. These aren't simple predators. They're intelligent, social animals with family bonds and sophisticated care behavior. That night, the tribe council reconvenes with this new data. The aggressive faction has largely dissolved. Destroying the hatchlings now means fighting not just 1 or 2 adults, but a coordinated family unit. The escape faction has strengthened. This development suggests the island is becoming increasingly unsuitable for long-term human habitation. But the coexistence faction, bolstered by the observational data, makes a compelling argument. We've learned to coexist with 2 adults, Kano explains. The hatchlings will require extensive food resources for months or years before they're large enough to threaten humans. During that time, the adults will be even more motivated to focus on easy aquatic prey rather than risky terrestrial hunting. We've actually bought ourselves time. And if we can establish positive associations now, demonstrating that humans don't threaten the young, we might create a long-term dynamic where these creatures tolerate our presence permanently. You want to integrate ourselves into their family structure? Iona asks incredulously. Not family, territory. We establish ourselves as non-threatening neighbors who share resources without competition. It's been done with other predators. Human communities coexisted with wolves, bears, big cats throughout history. We're doing it with significantly more dangerous creatures, yes, but the principle is the same. The debate continues into the night. But momentum is shifting toward a position nobody would have predicted a month ago. They're considering staying. Not just surviving week to week, but actually building a long-term presence on the island of ghosts. Day 35 brings a development that forces the escape option back into serious consideration. Contact with the other island. A small canoe arrives at Ghost Island's northern beach. 3 people from the neighboring island that Team 2 had spotted. They're scouts, checking the smoke and activity they'd observed, hoping to find fellow survivors. They bring news. There are 42 survivors on their island, including women and children. They've been there for 3 weeks, living in caves similar to the Marawai setup. But crucially, their island has no large predators. Some small dinosaurs, herbivores the size of goats, but nothing like the Spinosaurus. They're offering sanctuary. Space for the Ghost Island survivors. Safety. All it requires is paddling 5 kilometers through open ocean with their limited canoes, carrying 27 people, including a newborn infant, hoping to avoid storms and currents and whatever else might exist in these waters. The offer splits the tribe. Some want to leave immediately. The promise of safety, of living without constant vigilance, is overwhelmingly tempting. The Kalani survivors especially, who've only been on Ghost Island for a week, are eager to relocate. Others are reluctant. They've invested a month of learning, building, adapting. The cave is fortified. The food systems work. They understand the predator's patterns. Moving means starting over in a new location with new challenges. Lyra is conflicted. Moana is barely a week old. The ocean voyage is risky. But so is raising an infant, where any loud cry might attract monsters. Young Manu is adamantly opposed to leaving. He's become obsessed with the Spinosaurus, seeing them not as threats, but as subjects of study. The idea of abandoning this unprecedented opportunity to learn from living dinosaurs is unacceptable to him. Elder Kano is torn. His responsibility is to the tribe's survival, which logically suggests accepting the neighboring island's offer. But something deeper, call it scientific curiosity, call it the knowledge that what they're experiencing is historically unique, makes him reluctant to leave. The decision is made to vote. By sunset on day 35, every member of the combined tribe, excluding children too young to understand, casts their preference. 15 vote to leave for the neighboring island. 12 vote to stay on Ghost Island. It's not unanimous, but it's decisive. They'll prepare for evacuation. But implementation is complex. They have 3 canoes total, 2 repaired Marawai boats, and the Kalani vessel. Maximum safe capacity is about 5 people and supplies per canoe. That means at least 2 round trips to evacuate everyone. The logistics are daunting. Who goes in the first wave? The most vulnerable, children, injured, elderly, should get priority. But then the strongest defenders would be leaving first, making the second wave more vulnerable to Spinosaurus encounters while awaiting extraction. Koa proposes a compromise: balanced waves. First trip carries 8 people, 4 vulnerable, 4 capable. Second trip carries 9 people, similar mix. Third trip carries the remaining 10, including the strongest hunters and warriors who can defend the rear guard while awaiting pickup. The first evacuation wave is scheduled for day 36 morning, weather permitting. Everyone begins preparing, gathering personal items, rationing food for the journey, psychologically preparing to leave the island that's been both prison and home. But day 36 brings weather that makes ocean travel impossible. A massive storm system, larger than the previous one, settles over the region. Heavy rain, high winds, dangerous seas. The evacuation is postponed indefinitely. And as the storm intensifies on days 36 and 37, forcing the tribe deep into their cave shelter, something else is happening that they cannot observe. The Spinosaurus family is struggling. The hatchlings require enormous amounts of food to fuel their rapid growth. The adults are hunting constantly, but the storm has scattered the fish populations and made hunting difficult. The family is experiencing caloric stress exactly when they can least afford it. And hungry predators with vulnerable offspring to protect become the most dangerous creatures on Earth. On day 38, as the storm finally begins to clear, the tribe emerges from the cave to assess damage. They find that several of their fish traps have been destroyed by the storm surge. The coconut grove they've been harvesting has lost many trees. The carefully managed food systems they'd established are significantly damaged. They're going to have to rebuild food security or evacuate as soon as the sea's calm enough for safe travel, probably day 39 or 40. But while they're assessing storm damage, young Sila makes a discovery near the cave entrance. Tracks. Fresh tracks. Made during the storm while everyone was sheltering inside. The matriarch came to their camp, got close enough to scratch marks on the defensive barriers, and then left. She wasn't attacking. The barriers held, and she could have forced through if she wanted. She was investigating, assessing, possibly even seeking something. Manu studies the tracks and the scratching patterns, then offers an interpretation that chills everyone. She was looking for food. She's desperate. The hatchlings are eating everything she can catch, and the storm made hunting impossible for 2 days. She came here because she knows we have food stored. She was calculating whether we're worth raiding, Koa realizes. For the first time in 3 weeks, the Spinosaurus have reverted to viewing the human camp as a potential food source. Not the humans themselves necessarily, but their stored supplies. Or worse, if she's desperate enough, perhaps the humans too. The coexistence equilibrium is fracturing under resource pressure. That evening, day 38 of their island captivity, the tribe holds what might be their final council. The vote to evacuate is reaffirmed, this time with near unanimous support. Even those who wanted to stay acknowledge that recent developments have changed the situation fundamentally. The evacuation is set for day 39, assuming weather holds. They'll make the 5-kilometer crossing in 3 waves, exactly as planned. By day 40, the end of the 4th week, the completion of 1 month in hell, they'll all be gone. The Island of Ghosts will return to its prehistoric residence, and 27 humans will carry memories of the impossible. A month spent living alongside creatures that shouldn't exist, learning lessons about survival, intelligence, and the thin line between predator and prey. But as day 38 night falls and final preparations are made, Manu approaches his grandfather with a request that reveals how much the boy has changed in a month. "Grandfather, I don't want to forget. Everything we learned about their behavior, their intelligence, their patterns. It's important. Someone should remember. Someone should tell the story. Kano embraces his grandson, understanding what the boy is really asking. Permission to carry trauma as knowledge rather than just wound. Permission to transform horror into meaning. We'll remember, Kano promises. Every detail, every lesson. This month has taught us what our ancestors knew. That we're part of nature, not separate from it. That intelligence is the great equalizer. That adaptation is survival. And that monsters are just animals doing what animals do, Manu adds quietly. Yes, even that. As the tribe settles for their second-to-last night on the Island of Ghosts, the Spinosaurus family is active in ways the humans can hear but not see. Vocalizations echo through the darkness, the matriarch calling, the juvenile responding, the tiny chirps of hatchlings demanding food. The sounds are simultaneously terrifying and oddly domestic. A family, caring for young, struggling to survive in a resource-limited environment. Just like the humans in their cave, really. Day 39 dawns clear and calm. Perfect evacuation weather. The 3 canoes are prepared, supplies are distributed, people are assigned to waves. The first group, 8 people including Lyra and baby Moana, will launch at mid-morning after careful observation of both Spinosaurus to ensure they're in their predictable fishing. But before the first wave can launch, something unexpected happens. The matriarch approaches the beach. Not aggressively, not hunting. She simply walks to the water's edge, that massive sail catching the morning sun, and stares at the humans preparing their canoes. Behind her, barely visible in the jungle edge, the juvenile watches. And somewhere further back, the hatchlings are presumably secured in their nest. It's a farewell, or a warning, or simply observation. The creature documenting these strange neighbors who shared her island for a month, who respected her territory, who learned to coexist despite being so poorly equipped for the task. Kano, standing on the beach as part of the evacuation coordinator team, meets the matriarch's gaze. For a long moment, elder human and ancient predator regard each other across the distance. Then, Kano does something that surprises everyone. He bows. A gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, of gratitude for lessons learned. The matriarch tilts her head. That gesture they've seen dozens of times. The body language of consideration and thought. Then she turns and walks back into the jungle, disappearing into the ferns. The first canoe launches successfully. 8 people, including mother and infant, paddled toward the neighboring island visible on the horizon. The seas are calm. The weather holds. Within 3 hours, they're safely delivered to the sanctuary island, and the canoe returns for the second wave. The second wave launches in early afternoon. 9 people this time. The journey is routine. By late afternoon, 17 of the original 27 survivors have evacuated. The third and final wave, 10 people, including Koa, Kano, Manu, and the strongest warriors, prepares to launch at the first light of day 40. They'll spend one last night on the Island of Ghosts, maintaining final watch, ensuring nothing is left behind that might be useful. That final night is strangely peaceful. The Spinosaurus are quiet. The jungle sounds are familiar now rather than threatening. The cave, which seemed so dark and terrifying on day 2, feels almost like home. Around the fire, the 10 remaining people share stories of the past month. Each has their own pivotal moments. For Koa, It was the moment he realized the creatures could be understood rather than just feared. For Kano, it was witnessing the hatchlings and recognizing intelligence complex enough to rival any mammal. For Manu, it was discovering that even monsters have reasons for what they do, that violence isn't the same as evil. "We'll tell these stories," Kano says, gazing into the fire. "Future generations will know that once humans lived alongside dinosaurs, that we survived through intelligence and adaptation, that we learned to see predators not as enemies, but as fellow beings struggling to survive." "Do you think they'll believe us?" young Sila asks. "Probably not," Koa replies with a tired smile. "We barely believe it, and we lived it." As dawn breaks on day 40, exactly 1 month since they first landed on this impossible island, the final 10 survivors prepare to leave. They perform a brief ceremony honoring Taku and Mako who died here, acknowledging the lessons learned and saying goodbye to a place that transformed them all. The canoes are loaded. The last supplies are distributed. They push off from the beach, paddles dipping into calm morning waters. Behind them, on the island they're leaving, 2 adult Spinosaurus and 3 hatchlings continue the ancient rhythms of hunting, eating, growing, surviving. The humans are gone, but the island endures, a pocket of deep time where extinction never occurred, where the impossible is simply daily reality. As the island of ghosts recedes behind them and the sanctuary island grows closer, Manu turns to look back one final time. In the distance, barely visible, he sees it. A distinctive sail rising from the southern waters, the matriarch beginning her morning hunt, exactly as she has for countless mornings before these strange bipedal visitors arrived, and exactly as she will for countless mornings after they've gone. Some things change, some things endure, and some lessons about survival, intelligence, and the nature of being alive on a planet that's older and stranger than any story we tell stay with us forever. By midday, all 27 survivors are reunited on the sanctuary island. They're damaged, traumatized, transformed, but they're alive, and they carry with them knowledge that no other humans possess: how to read the behavior of creatures that shouldn't exist, how to coexist with predators far more powerful than themselves, how to adapt, survive, and even thrive when every assumption about the natural order is proven wrong. The Marawai and Kalani people will eventually return to their traditional islands once the volcanic activity subsides. They'll rebuild their villages, resume their lives, but they'll never be the same people who fled those eruptions a month ago. And on quiet nights, when children ask about the scars the adults carry, physical and psychological, they'll tell the story of 1 month in hell, when a tribe was trapped on an island with Spinosaurus, when survival required learning impossible lessons, when humans and dinosaurs shared territory and taught each other what it means to fight for existence in a world that offers no guarantees. Week by week, they survived. Week 1, terror, learning, and the high cost of ignorance. Week 2, observation, strategy, and the beginning of adaptation. Week 3, hunger, desperation, and the fragile balance of coexistence. Week 4, transformation, choice, and the recognition that monsters are just as complex as the humans who fear them. They arrived as refugees. They survived as They left as witnesses to Earth's hidden history, and the island of ghosts keeps its secrets, waiting in the vast Pacific for the next group of humans who think they understand what's possible and what's not. 5 years later, the return. The academic conference hall in Suva buzzes with polite skepticism. Dr. Elizabeth Chen stands at the podium, her presentation slides showing blurry photographs, hand-drawn sketches, and what appear to be fossil fragments. The audience, mostly paleontologists, marine biologists, and anthropologists, listens with the carefully neutral expressions academics adopt when encountering extraordinary claims. And so, Dr. Chen concludes, based on indigenous reports collected over the past 18 months, tissue samples obtained from this site, and radiocarbon dating that's frankly defying our current models, I'm proposing that a relict population of Spinosaurus aegyptiacus has survived in the Solomon Islands region into the modern era. The silence that follows is thick with professional courtesy, barely concealing disbelief. A senior paleontologist from Oxford raises his hand. Dr. Chen, with all respect, you're basing this on stories from traumatized volcanic refugees, drawings made by children, and tissue samples that could easily be contaminated or misidentified. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I agree completely, Dr. Chen responds, pulling up her final slide. It shows a photograph, grainy but unmistakable, of a massive sail-backed creature photographed from a distance on what appears to be a tropical beach. Which is why I've chartered a research vessel and am organizing an expedition to the location these survivors identified. I'm inviting qualified researchers to join me. The conference room erupts in murmurs, some dismissive, some intrigued, all skeptical. But in the back of the hall, sitting quietly and taking notes, is a young man of 23. His dark eyes are intense, focused. His notebook is filled with precise sketches that match the anatomical details Dr. Chen has been presenting with unsettling accuracy. After the presentation ends and most of the audience disperses, the young man approaches the podium. Dr. Chen? His English carries a Pacific accent. My name is Manu Kalani. I think I can help with your expedition. Dr. Chen looks up from packing her materials. Are you a graduate student? We're looking for credentialed researchers with field experience in... I lived on that island for a month when I was 8 years old. Manu interrupts quietly. The people you interviewed, the Marawai and Kalani survivors, those are my tribes. Elder Kano was my grandfather. And every drawing, every description, every behavioral detail you presented, I witnessed it firsthand. Dr. Chen stops packing. For a long moment, she simply stares at this young man, who's claiming to be a primary source for data most of her colleagues think is fantasy. You're one of the survivors, she finally says. Not a question, a realization. I am, and I'm also now a graduate student in evolutionary biology at the University of Auckland, specifically studying predator cognition and social behavior. I've spent 5 years preparing for the moment someone finally took our stories seriously enough to investigate. I need to go back to that island. I need to see them again. And I think I can help you understand what you're going to find. 6 weeks later, the research vessel Endeavour approaching uncharted coordinates in the Solomon Sea. The expedition team is small but well-equipped. Dr. Chen as lead researcher, 3 graduate students, a documentary filmmaker, the ship's crew, and their guide, Manu Kalani, who stands at the bow, staring at the horizon with an expression mixing anticipation and complex emotion. Also on board, having insisted on joining despite her 72 years, Pua, the midwife who helped deliver baby Moana 5 years ago in a cave while monsters prowled outside. She's traveled from her rebuilt village specifically for this journey, bringing with her the charcoal sketches Elder Kano made before his death 2 years prior. "Are you certain about the coordinates?" Dr. Chen asks Manu for the dozenth time. "I'm certain," Manu replies. "We've verified them against stellar navigation records my grandfather maintained, cross-referenced with volcanic activity reports from that period, and matched them to geological surveys. This is the Island of Ghosts. We called it that because it exists in maps, but not in official records. People avoid it. Fishermen give it wide berth. There are stories we're about to verify or disprove," Dr. Chen finishes. The island appears on the horizon as the sun reaches its zenith, exactly as it did 5 years ago, though from a very different perspective. The research vessel circles cautiously, using sonar to map the underwater topography, drones to photograph the coastline from altitude, and long-range cameras to scan for any signs of large fauna. The sonar readings are immediately anomalous. There are massive objects moving in the shallows, too large to be any known fish species, moving with patterns that don't match sharks or whales. The aerial footage reveals more: deep gouges in the beaches that could be large reptilian tracks, nesting sites visible in the island's interior, and swimming in the southern shallows, clear as day in the high-definition video feed. "Dear God," breathes one of the graduate students. That's a Spinosaurus," Manu completes, his voice tight with emotion he's trying to contain. "The matriarch. She's still here. The creature is larger than he remembers, or perhaps he was smaller then, his 8-year-old perspective making everything seem more massive. But even accounting for that distortion, she's grown. 15 meters has become perhaps 16. The sail is more scarred, bearing marks of 5 additional years of territorial battles and hunting accidents. But she's unmistakably alive. Swimming through the shallows with that distinctive crocodilian grace, hunting in patterns Manu documented obsessively during his month of captivity and has been refining in academic study ever since. "We need to establish a base camp," Dr. Chen says, already switching into research mode. "But carefully. Manu, where would you recommend?" Over the next 6 hours, they land on the northern beach, deliberately not the cave that served as the tribe's main camp, which might still carry territorial associations for the Spinosaurus. They establish a research station with proper safety protocols: electric fence perimeter, elevated observation platforms, underwater cameras positioned throughout the shallows, and motion sensors covering all approaches. It's more technology than the tribe had 5 years ago, but Manu insists on one thing: fire. Constant fire. The Spinosaurus learned to respect it once. It's a language they understand. As evening falls on their first day, the team gets their first direct encounter. The matriarch approaches the beach, obviously investigating these new arrivals. She's cautious, more cautious than Manu remembers, suggesting she's learned additional wariness over the intervening years. But she comes close enough that the cameras capture extraordinary detail. And behind her, moving with the adolescent awkwardness of creatures still growing into their bodies, come 3 younger Spinosaurus. Each roughly 7 to 8 meters long, sails developing but not yet full-sized, moving in loose coordination that suggests social learning and family structure. "The hatchlings," Manu whispers. "They survived. They're thriving." Pua, standing beside him, makes a soft sound of wonder. The one on the left. See how it moves slightly different? Favors its left side? That's the third egg, the one that needed help hatching. It was weak, but it survived. The documentary filmmaker is capturing everything, but Manu barely notices the cameras. He's locked onto these creatures with an intensity 5 years in the making. "Where's the juvenile?" he suddenly asks. "The smaller adult we documented. The one we thought might be the father or an older sibling." The team scans the visible areas but sees no sign of a second adult-sized Spinosaurus. Over the next 2 days of intensive observation, the answer becomes clear. The juvenile is gone. Whether it died, was driven off as the hatchlings matured, or left voluntarily to establish its own territory is unknown. What remains is a family group: 1 mature adult female and 3 subadults, operating as a coordinated hunting and defensive unit. On the 3rd day, Manu requests permission to attempt something unprecedented. "I want to approach them," he tells Dr. Chen. "Not threateningly, not intrusively, just closer, to see if they remember, if any of the behavioral conditioning from 5 years ago persists." Dr. Chen's immediate instinct is to refuse. It's dangerous, scientifically questionable, potentially traumatic for Manu. But looking at the young man's face, seeing the need there, the unfinished business from childhood trauma, she understands this is about more than research. Supervised, she finally agrees. Limited duration. At the first sign of aggression, you retreat immediately, and you wear a tracker so we can monitor your position and vitals. The approach happens on day 4 of the expedition, during the matriarch's typical mid-morning rest period. Manu walks alone down the beach, against every scientific protocol, against all common sense, driven by something deeper than either. He stops 50 meters from where the matriarch rests on her favored sun rock, the same formation documented 5 years ago. He doesn't approach further. He simply stands, visible, non-threatening, and waits. The matriarch notices immediately. Her massive head lifts, those yellow eyes focusing on this solitary human standing in her territory. For a long moment, she's completely still, processing, evaluating, remembering, or not remembering. Then Manu does something that makes the research team watching from camp hold their collective breath. He mimics the low-frequency vocalization he learned 5 years ago, the territorial call, the sound of recognition between creatures sharing space. The matriarch's response is immediate and unmistakable. She makes a call, not aggressive, not territorial, something else. A vocalization the team has been recording but hasn't classified yet. Then she settles back onto her rock and closes her eyes. Dismissal, or acceptance, or simple indifference to a creature she's categorized as non-threatening. Manu stands there for 10 more minutes, then slowly retreats. When he returns to camp, his eyes are wet, but his voice is steady. She remembered. "I don't know how I know, but I know." She recognized the sound, the behavior pattern. 5 years later, and some part of her remembered that humans can be something other than prey. Over the following 3 weeks, the research team documents everything. Population dynamics: 1 adult female, 3 subadults, 2 female, 1 male, based on behavioral observations and body structure. No sign of additional adults, suggesting the juvenile has indeed departed or died. Hunting patterns: primarily piscivorous, consuming an estimated 70 to 100 kilograms of fish daily per adult, with subadults eating roughly half that. Supplementary diet includes crabs, sea turtles, and occasionally seabirds caught at the water surface. Social behavior. Sophisticated family structure with clear hierarchies. The matriarch teaches hunting techniques to the subadults through demonstration. Communication is frequent and complex, with at least 15 distinct vocalization types documented. Cognitive capabilities. Problem-solving observed in multiple contexts. Tool use documented when the matriarch used a rock to break open a large shell. Memory clearly demonstrated through responses to stimuli introduced and removed over multi-day periods. Territorial patterns. The family group controls roughly 80% of the island's coastline. They've established predictable patrol routes, resting sites, and hunting zones. Most remarkably, they've maintained the same basic territorial boundaries documented 5 years ago, suggesting cultural transmission of spatial knowledge. Human tolerance. After initial wariness, the family group ignores the research camp as long as protocols are followed. No approach closer than 30 meters, no sudden movements, no harassment of their hunting areas. The provisional acceptance developed 5 years ago has persisted, possibly transmitted socially from the matriarch to her offspring. The data is extraordinary, everything Dr. Chen hoped for and more. But it's the personal moments that transform both Manu and Pua. On day 12, Pua performs a traditional blessing ceremony on the beach at sunset, chanting the old songs of her people that honor the spirits of sea and land. The matriarch, hunting in the shallows nearby, stops and appears to listen. For 5 full minutes, ancient human ritual and prehistoric predator exist in the same space, neither threatening the other. It's a moment of pure coexistence that brings tears to the old midwife's eyes. On day 18, Manu encounters the weakest of the 3 subadults, the one that needed hatching assistance, alone on a northern beach. Following protocols, he maintains distance, but the young Spinosaurus approaches to within 20 meters, tilting its head in that distinctive gesture of curiosity, studying Manu as intently as Manu studies it. They remain like that for perhaps 5 minutes. Young human and young dinosaur, both products of unlikely survival, both carrying forward the knowledge of their elders. Then the subadult makes a soft chirping call and moves back to the water, leaving Manu standing on the beach with the profound realization that intelligence and curiosity aren't uniquely human traits. On day 25, the expedition makes its most significant discovery: evidence of other human habitation. While exploring the island's interior, carefully, always in groups, always during the Spinosaurus's predictable rest periods, they find the cave system the original survivors used. It's abandoned now, slowly being reclaimed by jungle growth. But inside, they discover something extraordinary: a complete record. Elder Kano, in his final years before death, returned to the island secretly. Manu never knew, and created a comprehensive documentation. Carved into the cave walls using tools that must have taken months to fashion, he left detailed anatomical sketches of both adult and juvenile Spinosaurus, behavioral pattern charts showing daily activity cycles, territorial maps marking hunting zones and safe passages, a written account in both his native language and carefully phonetic English, explaining everything the tribe learned. It's an academic paper written in stone by a man with no formal education, but 7 decades of observational wisdom and 1 month of the most intensive field research any human has ever conducted on living non-avian dinosaurs. The final carving, near the cave entrance, reads in carefully formed letters, "To those who come after, these creatures are dangerous but not evil. They are intelligent but not malicious. They kill because they hunt. They defend because they must. We learned to share this island by respecting their nature without assuming we understood it completely. May you do the same. May knowledge overcome fear. May curiosity outlive terror." Kano of the Marawai, Elder and Student, Year of the Burning Islands. Dr. Chen stands in the cave for a long time, reading and rereading this testament. Here is the primary source documentation her colleagues demanded. Here is evidence of sustained observation, behavioral analysis, and systematic knowledge compilation that would satisfy any academic standard. "We need to preserve this," she says quietly. "Every word, every image. This is the Rosetta Stone of human-dinosaur interaction, the only first-hand account of coexistence that exists in the modern world." The expedition carefully photographs, measures, and catalogs every carving. The documentary filmmaker spends 3 days capturing high-resolution footage. Pua cries openly, mourning the grandfather-in-law she respected, honoring his final gift to future generations. Manu stands before the final inscription and makes a quiet promise. "I'll finish what you started, grandfather. I'll tell the complete story. I'll make sure your knowledge endures." The expedition concludes on day 30, deliberately matching the duration of the original survival ordeal. As the research vessel prepares to depart, the team has collected tissue samples, shed scales, blood from a subadult's minor injury, that will provide genetic data confirming this is indeed Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, with some unique adaptations. Thousands of hours of video documentation showing behavior never before recorded. Comprehensive ecological data about the island's ecosystem and how it supports a relict population. Dr. Kano's complete cave record, now digitally preserved. Personal accounts from Manu and Pua that transform academic data into human story. Most importantly, they have undeniable, peer-reviewable, scientifically rigorous proof that extinction isn't always forever, that Earth's history contains pockets where the ancient endures, and that humans can learn to coexist with even the most dangerous creatures when they choose knowledge over fear. On the final evening, Manu stands at the ship's rail, watching the island of ghosts recede into twilight. The matriarch is visible on her sunrock, exactly where she should be, eternal as the stones beneath her feet. "Will you come back?" Dr. Chen asks, joining him at the rail. "Yes," Manu replies without hesitation. "I'll establish a permanent research station, monitor the population long-term, document their development, their behaviors, their interactions with the changing world. Someone needs to be their voice, their advocate, the person who ensures that when the rest of the world discovers they exist, and they will now, they're seen as what they are, rare, precious survivors deserving of protection rather than exploitation." "That's a life's work you're describing." "I know. My grandfather spent 7 decades learning to read the ocean. He spent 1 month learning to read these creatures. I'll spend my lifetime finishing what he started." Pua, listening to this exchange, adds her own perspective. "The children who survived that month, 22 of them still live. Lyra's daughter Moana is 5 years old now, healthy and bright. Koa leads the Marawai tribe with wisdom born from trauma. Iona has rebuilt the Kalani village and teaches her people that intelligence defeats fear. Soru finally made peace with his brother's death. We all carry scars, but we also carry knowledge. And now that knowledge goes beyond the tribes, Dr. Chen says. The paper I'm writing will be published in Nature. The documentary will air globally. The cave inscriptions will be preserved in museums. Your grandfather's legacy will reach millions of people who've never set foot in the Pacific, who've never seen a dinosaur except in museums, who've never had to learn survival against impossible odds. Good, Manu says firmly, because the lesson isn't just about Spinosaurus. It's about us, about human adaptability, about our capacity to learn and change and coexist with the world's dangers, rather than simply trying to eliminate them. That's a lesson worth sharing. As full darkness falls, and the island disappears completely behind them, the three of them remain at the rail, each processing this experience through their own perspective. Dr. Chin sees validation of a controversial hypothesis and the beginning of a research program that will occupy decades. Pua sees closure for trauma, honor for the dead, and proof that survival creates meaning when coupled with purpose. Manu sees the continuation of a story that began with volcanic fire and will end, well, perhaps it won't end. Perhaps it will simply continue, evolving and adapting like the creatures it documents. 2 years later. The Nature paper has been published, the documentary has aired, and the Island of Ghosts has been officially designated a World Heritage Site and Protected Nature Reserve. The international community debates constantly about access, research protocols, tourism potential, and conservation strategies. Several nations claim sovereignty. Environmental groups advocate for total protection. Adventure tourism companies want limited access. Scientists demand research permits. But at the center of all this debate is a young researcher, now Dr. Manu Kalani, having fast-tracked his dissertation on predator cognition, who lives in a permanent research station on the island 6 months out of every year, watching and learning and documenting. He's watched the 3 subadults become full adults themselves. He's documented the matriarch aging, moving slightly slower, the scars accumulating. He's recorded the first evidence of possible breeding behavior between the 2 adult females from the original hatchling group and a new male that appeared from somewhere, possibly a surviving descendant of the original juvenile, or perhaps evidence that the population is larger than initially estimated. He's discovered 3 other small islands within 50 kilometers that show similar geological profiles and possible Spinosaurus presence. The population isn't 4 individuals on one island. It might be dozens spread across an archipelago, maintaining genetic diversity through occasional inter-island migration. He's become the world's foremost expert on living Spinosaurus behavior, publishing papers that revolutionize paleontology by providing observational data on creatures previously known only from fossils. But more importantly, he's become the bridge between 2 worlds, the ancient and the modern, the human and the prehistoric, the scientific and the spiritual. When he gives lectures, which is increasingly frequent as his prominence grows, he always begins the same way. When I was 8 years old, I watched a Spinosaurus kill my uncle. It was the most terrifying moment of my childhood. but it was also the beginning of the most important education of my life. Learning that the universe is stranger, more beautiful, and more complex than any story we tell about it. Learning that monsters are just animals we don't yet understand. Learning that survival requires not just strength or weapons, but curiosity, patience, and the willingness to see the world through new eyes. The island of ghosts exists because extinction isn't always forever. But it also exists as a reminder that Earth's history is deeper than we can imagine, that pockets of the ancient survive in the cracks of the modern world, and that humans have a choice in how we relate to that ancient power. We can exploit it, we can destroy it, or we can learn from it. My people, the Marawai and Kalani tribes, spent 1 month learning from creatures that should have killed us all. Instead, we survived, we adapted, we coexisted, and we carried forward knowledge that's now changing how scientists understand intelligence, behavior, and the nature of predation itself. This is more than a story about dinosaurs. It's a story about us, about human resilience, about the power of knowledge over fear, about our capacity to transform trauma into meaning. And it's a story that's still being written, every day, on a small island where the impossible is simply Tuesday morning. On the island of ghosts, present day, the matriarch rests on her sunrock, now nearly 20 years old, ancient by Spinosaurus standards based on fossil evidence of lifespan. Her movements are stiffer. Her hunting is less frequent as younger adults do more of the work. But she's still the dominant presence, the matriarch in fact, as well as name. The younger Spinosaurus defer to her, learn from her, follow patterns she's established over 2 decades of ruling this island. And on a distant beach, a research station stands, built on stilts, fortified with respect rather than fear, inhabited by humans who've learned to read the language of claws and teeth and ancient survival. 1 month in hell became a lifetime of discovery. 1 month of terror became decades of knowledge. 1 month when prey learned to see through predator eyes, and predators learned that some prey are worth tolerating. The story of the island of ghosts continues, week by week, month by month, year by year. And somewhere, in the deep memory of creatures that survived 65 million years of planetary catastrophe, a pattern persists. Humans can be dangerous, but they can also be curious. They can kill, but they can also learn. They can be prey, but they can also be something more interesting. Witnesses to the impossible, students of the ancient, bridge builders between worlds that should never have met. The matriarch has taught this lesson to 2 generations now. Perhaps she'll teach a 3rd. Perhaps the knowledge will persist after she's gone, pass through social learning to Spinosaurus yet unborn, creating a population that remembers humans not as enemies or prey, but as complicated neighbors who share space, sometimes conflict, but ultimately coexist. It's a fragile piece. It requires constant attention, constant learning, constant adaptation from both species. But it endures. Week by week, month by month, year by year, on an island where extinction forgot to finish its work, and survivors, human and dinosaur alike, found ways to write a different ending to stories everyone thought were concluded. Complicated neighbors who share space, sometimes conflict, but ultimately coexist. It's a fragile piece. It requires constant attention, constant learning, constant adaptation from both species. But it endures. Week by week, month by month, year by year, on an island where extinction forgot to finish its work, and survivors, human and dinosaur alike, found ways to write a different ending to stories everyone thought were concluded.